Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town Council public hearing this evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:45. The purpose of the meeting is the 690 Cedar Street sale. We'll begin the meeting with a roll call, please.
Councillor Annis. Councillor Braverman.
Here.
Councillor Budraco.
Here.
Councillor Camillo.
Here.
Councillor Donahue.
Here.
Councillor Minor.
Here.
Councillor Mankey.
Here.
Sorry. Councillor Mankey.
Here.
Councillor Mayor Del Buono.
Here.
And Councillor Annis.
She's having a problem signing in. She'll be on as soon as she can.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So right now it's 8 present with Councillor Annis technically absent, even though we're going to hope she can get on real soon. All right, we'll move on. The purpose of this evening's meeting is to provide an opportunity for interested individuals to express their views on the proposed sale of property located at 690 Cedar Street. With that, I will open it up for the public who would like to participate. If you are in the Zoom app, you can raise your hand in the participants window. At the bottom of the window, there's a choice for raise hand. If you are calling into Zoom, you can use the *9 function to raise your hand to be recognized. All right, I have,
Clark.
Yep, go ahead, sorry.
Clark has raised his hand. I'll attempt to
All right,
unmute him.
I have hit allow to talk to Clark, and he just needs to unmute his mic. Based on the spelling, I'm thinking that maybe Mr. Castell. Are you there,
Hello?
Mr. Castell?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can now. If you could just state your name and address for the record, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Clark Castell, residing at 167 Connecticut Avenue. I spoke to the town manager today, and he confirmed or clarified that the purpose of this hearing was, in fact, solely to get the public input on whether or not the idea or notion of selling the property was better than not selling it. And I said then, to him then, and I'm repeating it now, that the purpose of the meeting explained that way seems absurd to me. And the reason is I don't think you can expect the public.
Hello there.
Hello?
I can hear you.
Oh, I was interrupted by somebody on the screen. Okay. I don't think you can expect the public to offer meaningful, informed comments or opinions on whether selling is a good idea or not if they don't have more than a vague idea of what a proposed sale is all about. So the most important thing I think I can say tonight is that I think you're doing things backwards. That the public hearing should be held after more information about the proposed sale is divulged, not before. And since it looks like you'll be discussing the terms and conditions of the purchase and sale agreement tonight, I hope you'll consider keeping the public hearing open for another 2 weeks to allow the public to study all the material and come back to you later with comments. Then people can make informed decisions about whether selling the property is a good idea or not. The kind of details I'd like to know, and I hope I'll hear about them later tonight, who the prospective buyer is, how is he vetted, what does they plan to build, what is the sales price, how is it determined, what is the anticipated effect on taxes going to be, what tax abatement provisions are included in the purchase agreement, if any, what are the allocation of responsibilities and costs when it comes to getting approval from DEEP and the Department of Economic Community Development, state, federal, town agencies and commissions. I seem to recall we're going to need an environmental cap, if I remember correctly, that will have to be designed and built, maybe improvements to Myra Cohen Way. There's a lot more, but let me just leave you with one final thought. If you plan to build, I forget what Chairman Payne said the other day, more than 200 residential units, for rental at market rate, would you please consider designating at least 10% of them is affordable. And the reason I'm asking you to do this is that first of all, I think it's the right thing to do, but adding so many new market rate units to the housing stock runs the risk, I think, of leaving us open to more Dakota partner-like challenges. And that's surely the last thing we want to have to live through again in the future. So one more thing, you'll most likely hear the argument, this is what the town manager used with me today, that the next public hearing should be in the hands of the TP&Z. But I want to remind you that that body's deliberations are severely circumscribed and encompass only a fraction of the questions that should be of concern to the residents and taxpayers. So please, once again, keep this hearing open for a couple of weeks and give us all time to think about and study the questions you're going to be discussing under Article 6.9 later tonight. Thank you, everybody.
Easy packet with you.
Thank you, Mr. Cassell. All right, we also have
Thank you.
Ms. Lyons.
There. On the left-hand side.
Ms. Lyons, are you with us? Rose,
Hello?
are you there?
Yes, I'm pushing the *6 and waiting. It's Rose Lyons, 46 Elton Drive. And I just want to say thank you, Clark Castell, for going ahead of me. I just loved everything that you had to say, and I want to agree with him. I think this is probably the first big sale of town property that's come before us in the 10 years I've been listening and paying attention to town meetings. I would hate to stand here or say here that I'm in favor of the sale, which I am, without knowing, however, what the terms and conditions are as described by Clark. And Clark, you've come a long way since the day in the old auditorium when you were afraid to go up and speak. I'm glad I encouraged you to do it that night, and I'm especially glad I did it tonight. Thank you. I'd like to hear more about the sale other than nothing from the town council, and then going to or attending a TPZ meeting and getting a little bit of information, which I was surprised to even get that. Once again, I agree with what Clark had to say, 110%. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lyons. Okay. I'm just looking to see if there are any other members of the public. We'll give it a few more minutes just to make sure that no one is logging in a few minutes late. It is 6:53. Just for the public's sake, during a public hearing, it is just our job to listen to what the public has to say and not discuss the item at hand, just so everybody understands. I do not see any other members of the public present other than Mr. DiPaola, and no one certainly has their hand raised right now. So that being said, we will close the public hearing at 6:54. So a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Counselor Donahue. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Camillo, and all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 8-0. I would suggest everyone mute your mics, and we will go into our public meeting in about 6 minutes. Thank you, everyone. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Newington Town Council regular meeting of Tuesday, September 22nd at 7 p.m.
Apologies, that's wrong.
Oh my gosh, and I'm just reading it without even thinking about it. I apologize. October 13th, so welcome. We'll try that again, rewind. Welcome, everyone, to the Newington Town Council regular meeting of October 13th at 7 p.m. We just finished our public hearing. We're moving into our regular meeting now, and I would ask that you please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. We will begin our meeting. The next item on our agenda after the Pledge of Allegiance is a roll call. Please, Susan, if you would.
Okay, Counselor Anist. Counselor Braverman.
Here. Here.
Counselor Butreko.
Here.
Counselor Camillo.
Here.
Counselor Donahue.
Here.
Counselor Menke.
Here.
Counselor Minor.
Here.
Counselor Nagel.
Here.
Mayor Del Buono.
Here. All right, we are all present. Thank you, Susan. The next item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. And I would ask that we entertain a motion to remove item 10C, which is the September 29th special meeting minutes, as they have not yet been provided to all of us. So
I would so move.
Second.
thank you, Counselor Menke, and seconded by Counselor Ennis. Thank you. Any discussion on that? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, now we'll move on to just an approval of the agenda with the removal of item 10C.
I move approval of the agenda with the
Second.
removal of 10C.
Thank you, Counselor Menke, and seconded by
Second.
Counselor Anist. Thank you. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. We have an agenda. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is public participation. Any member of the public can participate. Just please, when you're recognized, if you would state your name and address for the record. If you're in the Zoom application, you can raise your hand in the participants window. And if you are calling into Zoom, you can use the *9 function. And we do have right now a few members of the public that would like to speak. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute, or at least try. The phone number ending in 322. Welcome.
Good evening. It's Bill de Blasio, 68 Harold Drive.
Hi, Bill.
Can you
Go
hear me?
ahead.
Okay, I did it right this time. Thank you for taking my call. I've been a long-standing member of Park and Rec Commission, and I'm just calling to voice my support for the Mill Pond project. And I'm hoping you guys will all vote in favor of the approval of the $57,000 to move that project into the design phase. And I appreciate all your time and efforts throughout this long crisis we're all in.
Thank you, Mr. de Blasio. It's good to hear from you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Thanks. All right, next we have the caller ID says Don.
Hi, good evening. Don Woods, 82 Ivy Lane.
Good evening.
I would like to speak also in favor of the $57,000 to hire the architectural firm of TLB. Just to state further, I am a member of the Parks and Rec Commission and also on the Mill Pond Pool Building Committee. I don't think it's any great secret that everyone in town, certainly you folks on the council, know that our pools are in extremely sad shape and have needed attention for quite some time. I could go back to as far as 2005. We started talking about a study that came out in 2007, I believe, on the Parks Department, Parks and Recreation Board, recommending that these pools be addressed. The Parks and Rec Department not only provides recreational swimming, but a critical part of swimming lessons. And it's very difficult to look forward to continued operations with the deterioration of the pools as we now see them. So again, I would hopefully gain your support tonight and move this project to the next step, because without this $57,000, basically the Mill Pond Pool Committee will be basically over. So again, thank you for listening and thank you for your attendance tonight, and hopefully you will see your way to pass this $57,000 appropriation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Woods. All right, the next caller is Ms. Lyons. Hi, Rose. Are you
Hi,
there?
Rose Lyons, 46 Elton Drive. And listening to Mr. Woods and Mr. de Blasio speak of the Mill Pond Park project and the $57,000 for the architect, I'm sure during this discussion it will be stated, but I'm wondering if the money's coming from the town side or if the Parks and Rec CIP money is going to be used for that. Probably not, but in any case, I think something should be done to look at what needs to be done, but I also don't want to see Churchill Park get pulled into this as well. All right, that being said, on to the next thing. Regarding the CIP, I see that the current CIP improvement program is under consideration to be changed, but that it's been asked that we hold off on that tonight. I attended the CIP subcommittee meeting via Zoom and was hoping to see a discussion tonight with former town councilor Tom Bowen in attendance. I believe at that meeting it was the consensus that rather than have Tom come before the subcommittee, that he come to the town council and explain how this CIP committee came to be. I know that the town manager feels as though it should be run differently, but I'd like to hear what he thinks it should be like, and I'd like to hear Tom's thoughts on it as well. I'd also like to know whether or not the town hall is open for the public to go into. I noticed on Saturday that I saw some people gathered by the community center, and I saw an adult with a child go into the building. I'm anxious to see it, having followed it for 10 years. I'd like to go in and see what's going on inside, and hopefully tonight we'll have some discussion on that. There's been discussion on Facebook, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention. I'm sure you've been told this, that people are complaining that they can't see the ballot box when they come by because people are parked in front of it. I don't know if there's any way to put an extension on the box to put something, place your ballots here. I know you can park in other places, but it's hard to locate the ballot box. I also noticed on the Complete Streets program that there's some discussion tonight for the sidewalk near the transfer station to the Berlin Turnpike. I think it's a great idea. Looking at the application, though, one of the questions was, does the town have a complete streets plan or policy? And I think it was indicated no. And if not, why don't we have something like that? We have several projects going on right now that I'd like to know the status of Garfield and Robbins, Garfield Street, the project that was proposed prior to the town hall reno. I think it was put off and put on hold until perhaps next year, but also Robbins Avenue, Maple Hill, and the Britton Avenue. I'd like to once in a while get an update in front of the town council so the rest of the town can hear what's going on, just not within the departments that are in charge of it. And last but not least, there's been a lot of complaints on Facebook, which I watch but don't participate in most times, about the racing on the Berlin Turnpike on the weekends. I know that it's probably a police department matter, but our town manager being our public safety director, I thought maybe he could look into it for us. Thank you very much. Stay safe and stay well.
Thank you, Ms. Lyons. All right, the next member of the public with their hand raised. is Ms. Francolino.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi, I'll keep my remarks quick and to the point. I'm just here tonight to ask you to support the Mill Pond renovation project. I think our parks and our pools are one of the gems of our town and they deserve our support. And we need to continue our infrastructure development so that Newington remains a place where people want to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Francolino. The next person that I see with their hand up is Mr. Knowlton.
Hi, this is Phil Knowlton. I live at 44 Cinnamon Road. I'm part of the Mill Pond Improvement Committee, and on, I guess you could say, the civilian side. And I'd like to voice my support for the funding of the $57,000 for TLB architecture, and just to kind of go into a little detail about the $57,000. Some of that is, from what I understand, to be some some zoning, or not zoning, but where you put out the markers and surveying, and then on top of that, there's core samples. There's going to be an update to the master plan. So I think what they'd like to try to do is to try to get that master plan back to you all by the Thanksgiving or pre-holiday timeframe. So with that, I'm fully supportive. Another subject I'd like to just touch on briefly is some of the old business that's coming up, which with regards to Mid-State Task Force, I think on the last council meeting that was brought up, and one I'd like to try to touch on, you mentioned saving money with the town and splitting up the roles and responsibilities, which I'm fully in favor of. I was wondering, when it was posted, it looked like there were some shared costs as well. And I'm wondering, are we saving money, or are we taking on a little bit of an additional cost? And if so, it sounds like it's a needed thing because it would be cross collaboration between the towns. I just kind of wanted that. I was hoping to get that a little bit clarified. And then lastly, one thing I noticed and wasn't really sure who to speak about, but I live off of Cedar, and I noticed police officers coming from New Britain approaching different traffic signals normally, but then after sitting for a little bit, they put their lights on, go through that traffic signal, then carry on at a normal speed, and then they get to Main Street, turn on their lights, go through, and then head up towards the turnpike. And it was during rush hour, and I noticed it a few times, and I don't mean to bring it up in such a forum such as this, but I'm very noticeable of how respectful our Newington Police Department is, and I appreciate them for doing what they do. And I'm hopeful that towns around us also are just as respectful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knowlton. Okay, let me just take one more look in our participation window. If any other member of the public would like to be recognized, please raise your hand. We'll just give it one more quick minute. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is email correspondence. And we did have one member of the public send in a letter to us. I'm hoping that all of the counselors had a chance to read that. It was from Mr. Bowles, and that will be attached to the minutes of this meeting for a public record based on the council rules of procedure. Did anyone else receive any email correspondence for mention at the meeting?
I did not.
Okay. Okay, so we will move on. The next item is remarks by counselors on public participation. Counselor Innist, go right ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm having major connectivity problems and I'm moving from room to room to try to connect here, and hopefully I have it here. Yeah, I just kind of pick up on the ballot box. I won't even tell you how many complaints I have received, especially by older people, that they cannot get to the box because people are parking on Garfield Street right in front of it. And I want to know, is there a way? I know originally, Keith, you said that it was going to be up by the town hall across from the library. I think that just makes a lot more sense. I do know of a couple of people who could not get to it, could not even find it. They even asked employees at the town hall who did not know where it was, and they ended up mailing their ballots. So, if that's what's going to happen, then I think the ballot box should probably be relocated to a spot that is easy for everybody to get to and accessible.
Thank you, Councilor Ennis. Any other remarks by councilors? So I just wanted to touch, I did get an email, one of the members of the public mentioned about the Berlin Turnpike traffic and racing, and I did get an email from a different member of the public on a couple of occasions that is an ongoing issue in her neighborhood. I guess she lives right near the turnpike, and I had received one a few weeks ago as well. So that does seem to be an issue. I know, just for the public's sake, in talking with the chief in the past about this issue, in some ways, while our police are responding as best they can, there's a couple of caveats, and that is they're not allowed to chase cars. And so that does limit what they're able to do, as well as the fact that with COVID, they're, doing traffic stops, when really necessary. So I will talk to the chief, or I'll have the town manager do that. Mr. Chapman, you maybe can just mention to the chief the concerns that have been voiced, because it's been brought up here, as well as, like I said, in a few email correspondences from members of the public, just to let him know that it is an ongoing concern of the public. Okay, thank you. And then most of the other members of the public who commented this evening, their questions or concerns will be addressed as we go through the agenda. So I'll wait on those items. All right, so we will move on. Next is consideration of old business. And the first item is a health update regarding COVID-19. And I see that we have Charles Brown from the Central Connecticut Health District with us, as well as Mr. Chapman. Mr. Chapman, do you want to start?
Yeah, I would just say that, as you all know from the news, the COVID-19 situation is apparently upticking to the point where there's concern being raised in many areas as to what's going to happen down the road. And Charlie's here tonight to bring us up to date. So I'll just turn it right over to him.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to give an update on where we are in Newington as of the 12th, we finally broke a dubious number. We've actually gotten more than 500 cases in Newington since the beginning of this. So we're at 501 cases. Total deaths in Newington stand at 52, with our last death being on the 29th of September. Total people tested in Newington was 8,026. Cases are increasing in Newington, with the younger population actually driving the increase. And this is a little different than what we had seen back in the springtime, where we had large numbers of cases in our nursing home populations in Newington. Now we're starting to see 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, some teenagers actually being the cases that are more prevalent. CCHD, the health district, has actually been working with Newington schools on contact tracing and quarantine efforts within the school settings. We've had a number of kids quarantined, and that number's increased recently, but we've seen no in-school transmission at this point that we're aware of, which is good news. Most of the cases that we see that are school-related or school-aged are from outside activities like athletics, or from cases that are household clusters that are causing quarantines and things of that nature. CCHD is working with all 4 of our towns because we are seeing a number of increases here in the last week. Over this weekend, we actually had 13 cases over the weekend that we had to start contact tracing on within Newington. as of this morning. So over the 3-day weekend, we picked up 13 additional cases in those 3 days, which is a good amount. We haven't seen that type of increase since probably May, June timeframe. So with that, I stand ready to answer any questions and provide any comments that I can.
Thank you, Charles. I'll open it up to the council for questions. Counselor Minor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Charles, if you would, just on the 52 recorded deaths that you represented, is that, can you break a number into facilities versus overall residents, or I'm just trying to get a handle on where that number comes from?
No, that's overall residents of Newington. So the majority of those cases, as I've mentioned before, have occurred within nursing facilities within Newington. That started early on. We have been very lucky here recently where we have not seen an uptick in fatalities. And we've really gotten a handle on that, thank goodness. So we'll try to continue down through that. We have seen, and I forgot to mention this, an uptick in the ICU utilization in the hospitals in the area, in the region. So we're watching that because as the hospitalizations increase, and especially ICU coming into flu season, we're really trying to keep an eye on that and try to protect our hospitals as much as we possibly can.
Okay, and if I remember correctly today, they were reporting at just about 2% of capacity currently. Does that sound about accurate?
They were. I'm not certain.
Okay, yeah.
Counselor, I just don't have that number off the top of my head.
Yeah, I thought I caught that on the tail end of the news conference this afternoon. With the recreational programming being opened up, with the Parks and Rec programming now going inside and some of the athletic events going on, the library, I believe, is scheduled to reopen or has reopened. Do you know that, or Keith, do you know that?
The library is going to have a opportunity for people to make appointments and browse through the library on half-hour increments. There'll be no seating anywhere. There'll still be the pick up and drop off from the cars, but the next step will be to allow people into the library on a limited basis to browse through the library and then leave, but they'll be an appointment only.
Okay. In terms of reopening the town hall, with predominantly most businesses at full operation now or 75% capacity, whatever the number may be, is there any forethought to opening up our building in a controlled environment, be it by appointment only or limited number of people in the building? Because I know there have been some people that are asking, why we're still doing things remotely. And speaking personally tonight, I've dropped my Zoom call twice. That it's just, I'm wondering where we can be to be at a point where we can meet in person. We have enough larger conference rooms that I believe you're still holding staff meetings that are exceeding the number of people that we hold as a body. And I would just ask whether or not that's something we can look at moving forward.
Again, I'm very apprehensive about opening up the town hall. In fact, we're getting complaints from employees that people are abusing the fact that we don't lock the doors and they're ignoring calling and making an appointment or having someone come meet them outside. This is a risky business, and we've been fortunate that we haven't had anybody get sick within the town hall. We had a close call a while back. Unless Charlie gives the okay, my position is that the town hall remains closed until the COVID-19 thing is corrected or a virus, a vaccine is provided or whatever.
Okay, because I'm just questioning how we've got 50 people in a gymnasium and recreational area in the building with no masks on, yet we can't have a body of 10 meet in the same air circulation that group of 40 or 50 is in. I just some consistency. This is all I'm asking for. Whichever way it has to be, I'm fine with it. But I think we need to be consistent in our efforts that they're the same way. And I don't want to try to diminish the need for recreational programming because I think people are using that as an outlet with everything going on. So I'd be curious to your thoughts on that, Charlie.
Well, my thoughts on that are I would be very reticent about, having those larger meetings as a whole. Once again, I think that just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean that you should. And a lot of the reopening guidelines that have been put out by the governor and by the state, really are not looking at what's actually happening within our communities at this time. I mean, even when we go back to the reopening for phase 3, we, at that time, we're at the beginning of our second wave of increases in cases across the state. Our state epidemiologist has acknowledged this and has acknowledged the increase in states across the state, as you've seen in places like Norwich and in New London and other areas. So in my opinion, I don't think that now is the time to start opening those types of opportunities for spread. As I mentioned before, one of the places where we actually see cases spreading within the community are in outside activities, and athletics and things of that nature. That's where we're actually having to quarantine younger kids from school and things of that, and to actually try to restrict that disease transmission. So, my opinion on this has not changed. I still believe that, the safest way that you can conduct business is remotely or by appointment. And that, is until we actually have a vaccine or a way to actually treat this effectively, that is the safest way to do business. And if we can conduct business in that way, I believe that's the way that you should do so. That's my recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Charlie.
Okay, thank you. Next, Councilor Menke has a question.
There you go. Yeah, Charlie, I assume someday there'll be a vaccine here. Are plans being made to distribute that vaccine town-wide?
Absolutely, and it's going to be a little different than just our regular mass vaccination clinics. The way that they're actually planning for this, and we've just started to work with the State Department of Public Health and the Capital Region to really allocate or come up with plans on how we allocate this vaccine. Initial quantities that we would receive whenever we receive them are going to go to critical infrastructure first and the most highly affected high-risk groups. So first responders, fire, police, town employees, schools, Board of Ed folks are going to get first crack at the vaccine. And from there, probably looking at some of our populations that suffer from the highest mortality. So probably our elderly population, those with immune compromised. We'll have to see how this is going to get rolled out. I know that the federal government's working with, some of the big box stores like CVS, some of those folks that do high volumes in vaccinations as well. They're going to be working with medical providers. This will be an all hands on deck type of scenario. So we're beginning to identify the populations and how we're going to reach those. We're lucky because we've been planning for mass vaccinations for a long time. I will say, I hope that the state and the federal government takes that into account, because during H1N1, they decided to go a different route than the plans that we all had. So that's one of the reasons why we're in conversation with the State Department of Public Health and Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security now.
And just one other follow-up, you would recommend everybody get a flu shot, right?
Oh, absolutely. And we actually have drive-through flu clinics that are here during October. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to plug that.
No problem.
We just recently came through Berlin, and we saw the most vaccinated in the town of Berlin last week. We're in Wethersfield this week, and anyone from any town can actually attend our clinics. You don't have to wait for Newington. Check our website for the times and days, but it is a drive-through clinic. So people are actually going to stay in their cars, We feel this is the safest way to be able to vaccinate in a COVID environment because that way we're not queuing people in lines indoors. It's an entirely new way of doing this for our volunteers and our staff. We've never done this before, but we were very successful in doing this in Berlin last week, and the plan is actually working out very well. I have to say thank you to the town for their assistance with helping us to find a site and to be able to help set up and work with this. So thank you very much for all of your help. And we hope to see a large number of folks at the clinic, because what we're trying to do is to make sure that we don't overwhelm the healthcare system with both flu patients that we see every year, in addition to what COVID patients that we may have.
Thank you.
Charles, I'm just wondering if you could talk a little more about the outdoor piece. So, for example, my employer will not let us unmask and eat in the same room as another employee if we're in within probably 10 or 12 feet of each other. But they have put picnic tables outside, and we're allowed to unmask and sit at a picnic table about 3 feet across from each other, which makes not a lot of sense to me. So I'm wondering if you could just speak a little bit to the outdoor piece. As you mentioned, that seems to be where the uptick can happen.
Well, outdoor is better than indoor as far as that's concerned. And I would argue that the 3 foot spacing is not sufficient. What we look at when we look at contact tracing is significant contact with someone, which is considered to be 10 to 15 minutes within 6 feet of that person, regardless of if you have a mask on or not. Now, having a mask on does protect you and protect the person that you're with or within that distance from, but the time frame is really what we're looking at. The driver for this particular disease has really, we've seen, be close contact with other individuals, which is one of the reasons why, having large groups together, being able to get people packed into a room really becomes problematic. Because if we have somebody who is a case and then we end up quarantining a larger number of individuals who may have been potentially exposed.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's important for people to remember out there that we are increasing our outdoor activities, but we still need to make sure we're practicing, our safety measures to stop the transmission of this. I think we're getting a little comfortable, a lot of us outside.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And remember, regardless of where you are, you need to remember your 3 W's. You need to wash your hands, wear a mask, and watch your distance. So that really are the 3 basic things that you can do to protect yourself, regardless of being indoor or outdoors. And as the weather is starting to get a little colder, we're going to be moving our activities more indoors and being in a lot closer quarters with folks, just by a matter of wintertime. That happens every year. And we see increases in cases of, colds and flu and everything just by proximity. Just a reminder, folks, you have the opportunity to be able to handle that by doing those 3 W's, washing your hands, watching your distance, and wearing a mask really does protect you in all those instances.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other questions or concerns, guys? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you very much, Charles.
Thank you, and y'all have a good evening and stay healthy, please.
You as well. Thank you. All right. We will move on. The next item is Town Hall project update. Mr. Chapman?
Yes, the project continues along. We are facing some challenges today with the heavy rain. About 2.5 inches fell. The water problem did not appear to be in the basement this morning when I went down there. However, the multipurpose room next to the gymnasium was had water seepage in. It appears it's designed on the outside with the hill next to the building is creating a problem where the water has no place to go except into the building. So that had to be cleaned up. I'll check the basement tomorrow morning to see how that is. As far as the gymnasium, they do have a temporary CO issued. The portable wall, however, is not to be used. It has some issues that need to be addressed. So therefore, If there's any activities in there, the wall cannot be installed. But Mr. DeMayo is well aware of that, and he's working around that problem. So other than that, we continue to find little difficulties here and there, but overall, sodding was put down, or sod was put down last week. Mulch was installed. The project is it's moving along demolition wise. The Old Town Hall, if you have been by there lately, the offices on the west side are completely gone up to the hallway, main hallways. And the gymnasium is gutted. So it's moving right along. We're hopeful that the weather holds out and we get the building down and get the at least the first course of the paving done. The reason why, let me just go back to something. The problem with the voting or the absentee ballot box is that we initially thought we would put it up on Mazzicoli Way. However, Mazzicoli Way is serving a dual purpose. It provides access to those handicapped individuals and those coming to the town hall, but it also provides the unloading and loading of all of the materials that are going in and coming out of that building. So you can't get to where the box would be located if there are trucks, six-wheel, semi-type trucks blocking the road. The other side, where the Old Town Hall is very difficult to maneuver right now because of the activity with the demolition going on. We do have our tax drop-off box over there. We certainly don't want to confuse the people from putting the vote absentee ballots into the tax box and vice versa. So it's not a simple situation. It's like, it's a perfect storm. We're trying to get that box in a place that people can access easily. I have observed it myself. There are times when people will park there. They should not be parking there, but I'll give you an example. Friday afternoon, there were 7 cars lined up dropping off their absentee ballots without a problem whatsoever. So it's not constantly a problem. It is on occasion a problem, but we really don't have any other place to put the box right now because of all the other challenges we're facing with the old demo of the Old Town Hall and the Mazzicoli Way being used as a multi-purpose way right now. But we'll look at it further. There is we added signage, higher signage, and I don't know. I don't have an answer for you.
Okay. We have a couple of questions. Councilor Mackey?
Yeah, just 2 questions. We've anticipated, we've come up with no problems with taking down the old building, no unexpected problems.
Well, yeah, there have been some, particularly where the dispatch center is vacated right now, but will be reused. There's been some issues with, I believe, electrical and heating and ventilation with the separation from the old building. So that's been a challenge. Some of the issues were not recognized early on, apparently in the project, but they're being rectified as they move forward. Other than that, I have to say that the demolition is going pretty smooth.
Okay. And I also understand that the freezers in human services are not working. Is that correct?
What's happened there is the architect did not design the building and in that particular area to have outside venting for the refrigeration units. So they're overheating in the building because there is no outside ventilation. So that's an issue that has to be resolved. There are a number of issues like that we're finding as we live in the building longer and longer, but that particular issue has been from day one. The architect's been aware of it, but there has not been a remedy yet.
But there is something it will be remedied, right?
Oh, it has to be remedied, sure. Yeah, that was part of the original plan, to have those refrigerated units vented outside. and they're not vented outside.
Okay.
Yeah, my understanding, I remember walking through the building the day that they were moving in, so before it was even opened, and that was an issue that was identified, and the architect was here that day looking at it. So we're talking a few months ago already.
Yeah, I don't think it's an easy fix.
And we're also coming up to, the human services are their busy season, if you will.
That's correct.
And we need that space.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Annis? Oh, sorry, Keith, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the council chambers are still occupied with everything that's supposed to go into the basement, but we haven't had rain for a long time, and that's why I'm saying tomorrow morning I'll check to see if water's still coming in. If that still happens, then we have another challenge, we'll say, to overcome.
Okay, Counselor Annis?
Thank you. Keith, is there a way with that ballot box to put like no parking signs so people do not park in front of them? I drove by the other day and the same car was there for 2 hours in front of the ballot box.
Yeah, I think we can probably say no parking, but then we're going to get complaints. Well, you have a box out there and there's no place for us to park because there's no parking.
Or for drop off or for drop off purposes only, but when a car is there for 2 hours, I purposely did that. That kind of frustrates me. And I know it's supposed to be a drop off zone in that area for Parks and Rec. My other thing is,
I'll look at the signage again tomorrow morning and maybe we can add some signage that will alert people to, this is temporary parking only and make it for 10, well, not even 10 minutes. You don't need 10 minutes to drop the
to get out there.
minute parking. Yeah, I'll look
The
at
other
it.
thing is, how about an update on all the AV going on throughout the building? The TVs and all that, the televisions and the AV equipment with High Point.
I'm drawing a blank completely, Kara.
Oh, no, the audio visual, the
Vision
connection
Point.
with CTV.
As far as, well, John maybe can update what he's been doing with the Newington Community Access TV, so.
Well,
John?
the TVs, I know the TVs are up and they're on in the hallways now, which was not the case a few weeks ago. So they've definitely been in here wiring and running things.
Yeah, the work has been going on with all of the AV equipment in the building, but I don't know what the status is with NCTV. John, can you update us?
Carol, are you asking about NCTV or Vision Point?
Vision Point, like what their whole work is. I mean, we had a rush and we had to do a bid waiver and everything because it had to be done. And it's now October and we don't know, have they completed their work?
They're just finishing up now. Yeah, most everything that they were supposed to do for the general government has been done. I don't know with the NCTV what work, if any, they have still left to do.
Okay.
But John can update us right now.
From an NCTV perspective, I mean, we're broadcasting, we're waiting for the, I guess, final configuration of the Vision Point systems so that we can see what inputs we're going to get from them so we can then figure out how we're going to broadcast from the building when we open the building. Currently today, as Keith said, the council chambers are loaded with documents and they are working in our area with the connections to the council chambers. And that's what I know.
Okay, thank you.
All set, Counselor Annis?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else on this item? All right, we will move on. The next item on our agenda is the CIP subcommittee recommendation. I noticed in our packet, we have a memo on behalf of Mr. Chapman asking us to consider holding off on any changes to the current process. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Chapman to let us know what he was thinking in this regard.
Well, I will say that, I'm getting more and more into the CIP. I came in at the tail end of it last year. And what I'm finding is that there's so many inconsistencies and challenges that we're facing. I've kind of broken it down into 4 areas. We have motor vehicles, you have the buildings, the streets, and you have debt service that's involved in that. And what I'm finding is that we're not keeping up in any of those areas with the challenges we have. And we need to redefine what it is the CIP plan is all about. And I don't see that the subcommittee has the ability to understand on a long-term basis all of the issues. I think that years ago, it was done with the administration and submitted to the town council for their review and approval. And I think you need to get back to that. There's just so many things that are not being followed. And, you know, right now you have an example where you have a cap of $6.3 million, which there was no cap in the past when I was here. But the cap really creates problems when we'll say right now, 1.8 million of that cap is for bond debt service. And so you only have really 4.5 million for capital improvements. And now you're going to add, if the school goes forward, more debt in a year or two. And you're chipping away at the basis of the CIP program as it was originally conceived. And so I look at, you know, the vehicles where our fleet is aging. We're depending on 6 out of our 16 snowplow trucks that are assigned plow routes that are now 16, 27 years old, when you have a life cycle of 12 to 15 years. So 6 of our vehicles are far beyond what they should be. Street-wise, we have 104 miles of road, yet we're budgeting less money today for street maintenance than we did 12 years ago, and when we had less mileage. So our streets are not being maintained properly and timely. And then we have the whole building assessment being done now, but based upon what I see just visually myself, we have some major issues with a lot of our buildings that have not been addressed and should have been addressed. So we really have to rewrite and reinvent the whole CIP program because you can't continue in the way you're going. So I'm suggesting that we hold off on doing any more CIP until we get a better understanding, and the facility study will be coming very shortly, and that's a major component of it. But I have major concerns right now. If we had a major blizzard in the town, I'm not sure our equipment could even handle it. So I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but that's what we have going on here.
Councilor Mackey?
It was my understanding that the CIP committee was going to look at making changes to that. If we don't do anything, starting in December, January, we're going to go back to the old system of having the committee look at all the recommendations. And so while I understand we need to change how we're doing things, and maybe we need to be more realistic about our needs funded through CIP, we need to make some changes, or we're going to be stuck by having no other option but to go back to what we've been doing in the past. And if that's not working, that seems kind of ridiculous to keep doing something that's not working. So we need a new plan somehow.
Well, I would ask that you let the administration develop this year's CIP plan and do it from a professional perspective. You know, there is no, we'll say, baggage with the administration. We are just going to look at what needs to get done and how to get it done and how to focus in on a 5-year plan where we don't have discussions going on that's going to change next year's plan that should be changing 6 years out. And that's not the case from what I saw. So you don't have a 5-year plan right now. It's a every year plan. You can't operate that way.
Right. I understand that, but I guess my point is, if we don't make that decision to make the administration in charge of CIP, we're going to be stuck. We're going to be by default going back to the old system of the CIP committee because we haven't made any changes to the process.
Well, I
So right now, the process is the CIP committee looks at this stuff. If you want to change it, we got to come up, we got to make the change. We just can't just, we have to
Right.
decide to do it. We just can't drift that way.
what I'm asking for is I'd like to get the Owens report in our hands first, and then we would be making a official recommendation to you as to how to move forward within the next couple of weeks. But we really need to know where we stand with the facilities, because that is a major component of the CIP.
Okay. Counselor Minor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll agree with Keith from the standpoint that there needs to be some type of a long-term projection in terms of capital projects. The problem is, as it's currently configured in the way that our charter is written, is that we don't have the luxury of saying this is the 5-year plan and the next council taking that same budget of projections and stay with it. That's where the problem lies. And this isn't a problem that's occurred over the last 2 years, 4 years, 6 years. This is an inherently long problem that's arisen that we're now paying dividends to problems that our buildings didn't get to the condition that they're in overnight. This has been, in my opinion, neglected or mismanaged, however you want to put it, for far too long, and it needs to stop. The residents and taxpayers of this town elect us to represent them. It's my job in my time as a counselor to represent their best interest, period. To say we need to 100% rely on our department heads with no input, to me, is irresponsible. And I can't agree to just let it be and let the administration do the work, because there are inherent issues with some people that are in positions that it's too much for them. And I don't want to say that I'm the answer, because I'm not, but I want to be part of the solution. And again, when you're saying that we've got a failed, equipment fleet, well, we have an equipment reserve account that is a line item. And that money is being managed by the administration or representatives of the administration. We don't select what truck gets purchased within that line item. That's in as a budgeted line item within equipment reserve. We don't get into the devils of the detail of specifically what it is. I think, for the future, that there should be some of that discussion. Just look to your thoughts, Keith. I agree there needs to be a long-term plan. That much I'll go with.
Yeah, I think that the problem, the way I see it, is that you don't fund it at a level that it needs to be funded. We're building the capital improvement plan based upon a set figure and not looking at what the needs are. As far as the vehicles go, I mean, looking at our vehicle inventory, the plan, when it was originated, that I originated actually, called for at least one new 6-wheel dump truck every year for the highway department. Right now, we have 11 vehicles that are, I'll say, not beyond the 15-year mark. But the other 6 are upwards of 27 years old. That was never intended to happen. But when you don't have the funding allocated to replace the vehicles, then you keep the vehicles. And then you keep them another year and another year. And now we're behind the 8 ball in that regard, just as we are with streets. We need to have about $1.5 million every year for street improvements. We're at a $900,000 level right now, which means that instead of being on a 20-year street improvement plan, we're really on a 30-year street improvement plan. And if you look at Wilson Avenue, for an example, yes, the street was just milled and repaved, but look at the curbing. That wasn't done because the money is not there. North Mountain Road, the same thing. It used to be when the adequate funding was provided, that the whole road was done where you didn't have to go back for 20 years. Today, you can have a beautiful, pavement, but the curbing is falling apart. And that's not in the best interest of the town overall in the long run. So we're, instead of budgeting the 1.5 million a year that we need for streets, we're budgeting 900,000. And it's been down as low as 700,000. Where, in years past, it was at 1.4 million. So there has to be some consistency built into the plan that doesn't take money from Peter to pay Paul. And that's what we've been doing. And now with the bonding and the debt that you're building, that's all part of the total 6.3 million in CIP every year. And when you make those debt payments, you're taking it right out of the heart of the CIP plan. So you really can't continue doing what you're doing. In my view, you look at the buildings, they're not in good shape. And we have a lot of catching up to do. So it's going to be a struggle. Hopefully our economic development efforts pay off to help offset some of those costs.
Well, I think that's the key, that we've fallen behind on our economic development over, let's say, I'm just going to go with a 10-year number, where I have looked at grand list growth to what the mill rate is to where we stand at a lot of our neighboring towns. And we have definitely fallen short in terms of the growth substantiating the mill rate increases. So we might have had a lower mill rate, but we've overtaken some of our neighboring towns that had a higher mill rate, but because of their grand list growth, they were able to absorb it where we haven't been able to. And I 100% agree with you that we need to fund, projections on cycles. And if you're saying that 975,000 is not equating the proper amount of, streets that we do annually, that's really an operational decision made that wasn't within my conversation to know what it should be over 20 years, because you're right. It should be on a 20-year cycle. It's a life cycle of a road is, approximately 20 to 30 years, and that should be max. But when you get into equipment, it's the same thing. It should be scheduled on a reserve replacement account that it costs you whatever, $500,000 for an engine now that we just bought this year, whatever the number may be, and you're doing a 3 or 4 or 5% projection for the next 20 years to replace that.
That's
and
correct.
The fire department is now pushing into equipment that's approaching 25 years by the time it gets replaced. And that was not intended to be that way. It was supposed to have been on a 20-year cycle. And unfortunately, we've extended those life cycles out because we haven't had adequate funding in our equipment reserve account.
Absolutely. You're 100% right. And that's unfortunate.
Part of the
But
problem,
the question is how to fix it, is I guess what it comes down to. Thanks. I'll yield it. Thank you.
Keith, part of the problem with the fleet piece is that a lot of the vehicles that we have in our fleet are not coming off the books when they should. And that's creating more vehicles that we're trying to then maintain and replace instead of taking things out of rotation when we replace them. Is that correct?
And what happens is, because the way in which the CIP program has been handled, we end up reducing the cost of the CIP, but we in fact increase the cost of the operations, because, for an example, we have, let's just say we have, I think, about 17 vehicles in the highway that should have been removed out of the fleet, but they've been kept because they serve as backups and so forth. Well, those extra vehicles result in extra manpower needs, so we have more mechanics than we used to have. Mm-hmm. So it's a catch-22. You can't beat the system. The system is going to beat you. And we really have to take the buildings, take the streets, take the equipment, vehicles, give a life cycle that makes sense on all of these, and not steal from it once it's set and put into place. Now, if that means raising taxes, it means raising taxes. But it also means that you have to look beyond just the CIP, and then you have to look at, the buildings and the use of the buildings. And that's a whole other area that I'm looking at right now of how the buildings are being used and why do we have as many buildings as we have? And can we eliminate some of those buildings and still provide the level of service that people expect? And, you know, we're up to like 50 buildings. We have a highway department, for example, that's a Butler building. And I'm sure Chris knows that the life expectancy of a Butler building is not 60, 70 years like we have a highway department right now. That building is far outdated, and it has holes in the walls. And we're just, again, we're going backwards. But I want to give a whole report on this once we get the other component, which is the facilities. And so we're going to get that very shortly. The equipment has already been written up. The streets have been written up. I'm now into the buildings, but what I'm finding is it leads me into another whole report on the operational side on what's happened there as well. And it's not good either.
The current CIP committee. Go right ahead.
Or did you ask? I couldn't hear you, Beth. Were you referring for me to
Yes.
some remarks?
Yep.
Thanks. I appreciate Mr. Chapman, Mr. Minor for giving all those figures and all those details that go into the CIP that make this not something that can easily be fixed by a subcommittee between now and the next budget cycle. And what we presently have, as we've all seen, is just a quagmire of not only those problems, but also things that are questionable that should probably not be in the CIP, and also the understanding as to how much money we have and what we can afford to spend, and not have people, the different departments present things that are well and good, but we have a limit and we just don't have the monies there. And therefore, at the subcommittee meeting that we had that Ms. Lyons pointed out from public participation, it was thought that it was best to come back to the council's whole to let you know how complicated things are above and beyond the surface, and that perhaps it might be a good idea to let our experts that we are paying money for, Mr. Chapman and all the department heads and so on, to address this in some kind of realistic way, so we have a realistic basis in which to conduct this committee in the future if deemed so. So having it go the way it is right now is not for lack of any of the committee members, but just uncontrollable and a quagmire for all of us, which isn't pleasant for the public, isn't pleasant for the town, and isn't pleasant for those of us that are sitting on the committee. I do think the facilities will study, seeing that may help in some ways, but I don't think it's going to resolve things or get close to making it any more imaginable during this next budget cycle. So that's my 2 cents worth beyond what, and I don't disagree primarily with what Mr. Minor said or what Mr. Chapman said, but it lets you know where I'm coming from and why the council as a whole needs to have some kind of vision to us as to what they want us to do or not do. And I foresee our subcommittee really not being able to have a handle on it between now and the budget in order to piecemeal or make some changes if possible, because it's such, as I said, a quagmire of things and many different things to decide that go beyond at least some of the members of the committee knowledge that our town department heads and the town manager can give a clear view to, so that if we need to make decisions, we can. But in the short amount of time, I don't foresee that happening to make things go smoother. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Nagel. I just wanted to, I don't see any other hands up right now, so I'm going to jump in with my 2 cents right now. In listening to what Mr. Minor said earlier, part of what he was saying was that we try to put together this 5-year plan which is part of the CIP process, but it never really sticks. And that's been a point of frustration for me, having served on that committee for several years now, that we talk about it as like a draft or a possibility, or it's really more of like a checklist. Well, we have these few projects hanging out there, but we're not actually prioritizing and putting them in the order we need to and assigning dollars to them. And that's where we, I think, fail in terms of long-term planning for our buildings and facilities. And in discussing it a little with Mr. Chapman, and from what he said tonight, that really is one of our areas of biggest concern, is that we need to make sure we're planning for the future, that we are prioritizing those, and that those projects that are big ticket items that we need to plan ahead for don't become political footballs. And, we've seen that happen in the past where, one group wants this project, one group wants that project, another group wants that project. And depending on who gets elected every other November, those things change. And that's kind of what I think Councilor Minor was alluding to. And that's where we need to really work with Mr. Chapman and the staff on developing a true plan for the future. And I think that this entire council agrees on that based on the fact that we all agreed to do that facility study. And that seems to be a driving force, I think, for us moving forward and how we allocate dollars and how we want the CIP to operate and look. So I guess I understand now that Mr. Chapman has clarified a little bit about why he wanted us to table this until that study comes in. Because when I read the memo, I was kind of like, well, what does the study really have to do with CIP specifically? But I'm understanding now the parallel that you're drawing, Mr. Chapman, to that. So I do think I feel the sense of urgency from the entire council on the fact that budget season is right around the corner. And so if we don't make a change to the process, then the committee will be meeting as it always has in the past, because that is the way our, well, not our charter, but our ordinance was written and the way it was resolved. So that committee is in effect and will have to meet if we don't get it taken care of. So I guess what I would ask is that we consider keeping this on the agenda. We still have one more meeting in October, but perhaps keeping it as old business for once the facility study does come in, and making sure that we make it a priority to get it moving in the direction we need it to get moving. Because as you know, the CIP committee typically begins to meet in January to discuss the budget. And so we would need to get this going and decide where we want it to be, or leave it as is for this year, or if we give it to Mr. Chapman, then we have to make that procedural change. And I think that's the concern of the council, is we either have to make the procedural change or not, one or the other. We can't suspend it, so to speak. There are lots of members on that committee, including some members of the Board of Education, that have to be included in the process if that process continues. So that's where we're at. We need to decide as a council if we're comfortable with continuing this item until after we get that facility study. I do see a few more hands up now. So the next person with their hand up was Councilor Minor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one more thing to piggyback onto it is I would really like to have the insight of former Councilor Bowen to how it came to be on where we are now with the CIP being created with PAYGO projects as well as bonded project or long-term debt, because I think that's a key that also needs to be considered. Because the one thing I can say that Newington has done, at least in the 10 years that I've paid attention, is historically have maintained a very low debt. And that is something to be applauded by all the previous administrations. However, my concern is that the debt was not maintained to a level of keeping up with the assets we've got. And I think that is where we've gotten into the quandary that we're in now. And I would be curious or interested to his input for us to all dialogue about it, to how it came to be. And the second thing on how it was set up to a percentage base of the grant list, which I think is a favorable way to do it, because if you increase your grant list, you increase your projects and what you can do. And if you have a grant list reduction, then unfortunately you have to pay the consequence of that reduction. So I'd be curious to see what anybody else's thoughts were, at least to have that dialogue at some later date. But I think this needs to stay on the calendar until we can resolve it after facility studies come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Minor. Counselor Camillo.
One of the things that keeps getting brought up is the council changes every other year at times. And the council keeps changing what's in the CIP. So we don't belong there. Our administration and our town manager should come up with a budget and then present it to the mayor and the council every year. We can fine tune it if need be. But that's what we hired them for. We're not the pros here. Chris, I don't think Chris runs his business as well as he'd like to see the town either. We all have problems in this state. So I really would like to see this go back to our administration and our town manager. The way it's going now, it's just political grandstanding. You know, this department contacts this counselor or this one, hey, we really need this, see what you can do. Well, that's not the way it should be. It should just be within the administration and not us.
Thank you, Counselor.
Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Chapman.
did you call on me?
I was trying to get Counselor Ennis, but she appears to be frozen right now. So go ahead if you have something.
Okay, I just want to also reiterate that the problem is not just contained within the CIP. The operating budgets are directly impacted by the CIP and vice versa. It's hand in hand, and that's part of what you're going to get from me as a report, hopefully in the next 2 weeks, that to solve this problem, it's not just, you know, figuring out how to deal with the CIP. You also have to figure out how to deal with the operating budget. Along with that is you have to figure out, you know, grand list growth, economic development. It has been non-existent for all practical purposes for many years. And we can't continue to spend the money that we're spending if you don't have grand list growth. So that's another area where both the CIP and the operating budgets have to be brought under control better. You can't continue to have these tax increases. So, you know, it all has to line up, and we have to be realistic that if you can't continue to fund a building and you can find a way to close it or dispose of it, you may want to do that. It's not been talked about in the past, but the reality is you can't eliminate roadways. You still have to maintain those roadways, which gets into equipment. You have parks that have to be maintained. It's all the same, you know, we'll say project or challenge, but doing one piece is not going to solve your problem. And again, I will get into that in my report over the next couple of weeks to greater detail and give you examples, hard examples of what has happened and what should not happen in the future. So I would ask that the council just let this stay on the agenda and let me work with my staff. And if you decide after that report comes out that you still want to have a CIP committee, that's your call. I'm just trying to, you know, set the table for you.
I do see Counselor Pedranco hasn't had a bite at the apple yet, and her hand is up. So go ahead, Counselor Pedranco.
Actually, this is kind of piggybacking on what Mr. Chapman said. The CIP is a small but, you know, important part of the budget, but there's other things to consider, such as the operating budget, but also the fact is the town side is only about 30% of the whole budget process. We've got the Board of Ed, which is driving most of the expenses. And if they're not, if they're not included in some of this discussion on how to plan appropriately for future capital expenses, and if they're not on board, and if they're not, we can tighten our belts on our side as much as we want to, but we're still going to be, quite frankly, screwed if the other side, if keeps going up and up and up, and we're trying to, make sure that we don't, throw away our pencil stubs at the end. So they've got to be part of this discussion. Plus, we also have some of their expenses within the town side CIP. Do they belong there or not, whatever. And also, I would also encourage you to look at, I know the Parks and Recreation has their CIP, and I think we have to start looking at all these different arms of the process and kind of bring them all into one, at least understanding of what needs to be done so we can all continue to grow. But in terms of also, looking back at history and bringing, Mr. Bowen or whatever into say how it was started and why it was started, I'm not sure that's an effective use of time at this point. CIPs have been around for a while. There are plenty of examples out there, through capital, through the CCMC. It's a best practice. You need a CIP, but how they function and how they operate, what the process is, needs change. From when Newington first instituted the CIP, that was years ago. We've changed as a town. Our financial situation has changed. The people have changed. The staff have changed. I don't think it's effective to go back, or it would be a good use of time to go back and dig up the history and whatever. I think what we need to do is look at the best practices now, look at our needs now, where we are, who we are, where we want to go, and work from there. Just my opinion.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Petrakis. Councilor Minor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with Gail to a degree that, yes, we need to concentrate here moving forward. The Shared Services Committee is really something that should be pursued stronger as we move forward, because that has to be part of the solution. There needs to be as much shared services within our own organizations that we're not duplicating, because as Keith alluded to, CIP is just one little piece of the puzzle when it comes to the budget. The operational budget is the core of everything else. And I think that's where some of these changes need to occur, is within the operational budget. Maybe there needs to be an increase in some areas of it. Maybe there needs to be a reduction in other areas. But I think as a whole, it needs to be looked at across the board of, the entire $100+ million budget, not just one little piece of it. Thank you.
Well, Councilor Minor, I agree that the whole budget needs to be looked at, but that is always an issue. But right now, just the process of CIP and making sure that we're addressing it the best we can is kind of what's on the table. Councilor Mackey, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I agree that we're talking about the CIP at this point. I get the sense that we're in troubled waters here for a number of reasons. But we can all agree, I guess, that the way the CIP works now, it's not necessarily working well. We don't know what's included in the CIP, what's not included in the CIP. You're right. Every year, the plan or the projects that are planned for, they may change and they may be shuffled around. But what we need to do something. I'm not so concerned about what happened 10 years ago or why this was set up this way. We all can agree that it's not working. So rather than spend time figuring out why it was set up, and I'd rather find out how we can get it from where we are now to make it a more effective plan, so we can plan our spending. We all have to do that in our own personal lives. We have to plan our spending. We just can't change our goals in the middle of the year or the middle of our plan. We have to have a plan. We have to stick with it, and so I agree with that. But we need to go ahead. Looking back's not going to help us too much, I don't think. I'd rather look at what we can do to fix what we have now. And it may be an ongoing process. We may try something next budget season, and then something that after that, if it doesn't work. But we need to have we need to move forward. We can't just sit where we are.
Thank you, Councilor Mackey. Councilor Nagel.
Yes, just to mention that the Shared Services Committee has met to initially get organized. There are new people on it, whatever. Mr. Minor is a member of it, so I know he's fully aware of it. So there is that plan. I won't say plan, but they have started to meet. And also the facilities study came up at that point too, which kind of would deal with what we share, what we don't share, and as has been mentioned, ties in with everyone. So just to let the public know, that committee has met, and we need to obviously move forward in connection with the other things that you have, we've just been referring to in CIP. Thanks.
Thank you. So I haven't heard any resistance to the idea of keeping this on and perhaps discussing again after we receive the facilities report. And at that point, Mr. Chapman will have a report for us as well. Is there any member of the council that has any problem with that? If not, we're going to move forward and keep that on the agenda, move on to the next item for the evening.
Do it.
Okay, great. So we will keep that on the agenda and we will look forward to Mr. Chapman's report as well as the facilities study. We will move on now to the next item on our agenda, which is the Mid-State Task Force Non-Emergency Intra-Agency Agreement. So you'll remember that we did discuss this at our last meeting. This is an agreement between the towns of Newington, Rocky Hill, Berlin, Cromwell, and Weathersfield, and it's for the pooling of non-emergency police services. We have the agreement in front of us, which outlines the services that each town is responsible for over the next 5 years of the agreement. There is the ability to pull out of the agreement with 30 days notice if for any reason it's not working out for the town. And the agreement has been already reviewed by our town attorney, Benjamin Ancona. So with that being said, I will open it up. We are looking to adopt this resolution this evening, which is in our packet. So I will open it up for discussion. Councilor Mankey.
Want me to read the resolution so we can move forward?
That would be great. Thank you.
Resolved that the Newington Town Council hereby authorizes Keith Chapman, Town Manager, to execute the non-emergency interagency agreement with the Mid-State Task Force as attached to this resolution.
Seconded by, is that you, Councilor Braverman?
Yes, it is.
All right, seconded by Council Braverman. Now we'll open it for discussion. Deputy Mayor Bedrejko.
Maybe, I don't remember this being asked last meeting, but maybe it was. I just have a question or two. What would you consider some examples of non-emergency services where we would be called into this?
I would say an example would be what took place last week with the passing of Police Chief Collette. The other agencies and the other towns assisted in the burial process of that and were represented at various locations. That would be an example where it's not an emergency, but it's something that all the departments probably participated in. Excuse me, my dog's climbing all over my papers. Parade, you may have a need for other police departments to assist if you had a parade in town and you had to block off streets. So it's more of a mutual aid where working together, normally on a scheduled basis, not an emergency basis, where they can work together, whether it be on an operation or a training. It's nice to have that ability to share information and to share resources in those towns. So you're not there by yourself. You have support when and if you need it, whether it be an emergency or whether it not be an emergency. And that's what this deals with, is some non-emergencies.
No, I think it's a great idea. It's another example of, shared services and again, law enforcement cooperation. But just structurally, I'm just curious because I know that the town that gets called to assist is responsible for the salary, wages, overtime, whatever. So in terms of order of calling, I mean, I would hate to have, because we have such a good police department, knowing to always be called, to assist other towns, and then that would add up to our salaries and wages. Is there some kind of pecking order or?
I think that the chiefs, the 5 chiefs, understand each of them has to participate in basically an equal manner. So they probably share information periodically that basically says, look, Berlin, you need to step up a little bit more because you're falling behind, or whatever, maybe Newington may be falling behind. So I think the chiefs have that rapport where they communicate and they discuss what the challenge is, how to best address it, and who can best address it. And I think that overall, at the end of the year, it probably balances out pretty close for everybody.
Okay, and there'll probably be some record keeping too, I would imagine.
I would think that they keep a record. I didn't specifically ask the chief that question, but I can certainly ask him if he has been and how it works. And if it's different than what I just explained to you, then I'd get back to you with a memo.
Okay, and the legal repercussions, I guess Attorney Ancona will look this over in terms of if, for example, there was some kind of operation, just, negligence or workman's comp or whatever in another town, and we happen to be part of that force. I mean, if just so we can get an answer on how that would be handled.
Well, generally speaking, if you look at number 5 on the page that's up right now, that kind of outlines how the responsibilities work. And each town basically is responsible for their own staff. Nobody knows what's going to happen and when, but I think that it's up to each town that participates to provide the protections to the officers from the town that they're working for, not from the town that is seeking the assistance.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Anist.
I hope I'm working now. I had to reboot again. I think one of the activities that they do is the DUI checkpoints. I think this is one of the things. And so that's the major thing that they use. Keith, how long, this has been in effect for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
This isn't the first time that we've renewed it for 5
it's-
years.
It's worked very well, and I think that all 5 chiefs enjoy this reciprocal arrangement they have, and it helps them manage the operations that they're faced with, knowing that they can call on the other 4, where at some communities, they don't have that arrangement. So it's a good situation for the town.
It is, it's real good. I hear about it all the time. But I just want to make sure that the other towns are passing it with no alterations. Am I correct? So when we vote on this tonight, this is the final version.
This is the final, and everybody's agreeing to it, yes.
Good. Thank you.
Counselor Minor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just another example of the compact is they have a mid-state accident reconstruction team, which each department has a number of officers that are in the unit. So in the event of a serious accident, they're able to collaborate as a whole to bring in basically a crew of 8 or 10 specialized officers to be able to reconstruct that accident. And it saves the ability for each town to not have to spread themselves thin in the event of a major incident. So that's just another good example of how it works. And it's been like that way for years and worked very well.
Thank you, Counselor Minor. Yeah, my attention was drawn to item 4 on the screen, which is that at all times when joint police functions are being conducted, police officers assigned to the function shall be deemed to be members of an authorized group and shall have the same powers, duties, privileges, and immunities as are conferred on the police officers of the municipality in whose jurisdiction the group is operating. So really, our officers, if we have an officer that really specializes in a certain area and another town needs that expertise, then they're going to be utilized in that function in another town and would be treated just as the officers in that town would be. And this has served us well over the years, so it certainly makes sense for us to move forward with this tonight. Any other council comment? If not, we'll go to a roll call vote. Okay, Susan, if you would, please.
Counselor Anist?
Yes.
Counselor Braverman?
Yes.
Counselor Budrago?
Yes.
Counselor Camillo?
Yes.
Counselor Donahue?
Yes.
Counselor Menke?
Yes.
Counselor Minor?
Yes.
Counselor Nagel,
Yes.
Mayor Del Buono,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you, Susan. Motion passes unanimously. Next item on our agenda is update on facilities study. I will turn that over to Mr. Chapman.
Okay, you have before you what the latest from Owens on their work. All of the inspections, on-site inspections of the facilities are complete. Prior associates is in process of compiling all the information. Owens Realty Services working on complying with the HVAC, MEP data. They're also working on obtaining the utility data. Somewhat difficult to get at times from the utilities, but they're getting it. So they expected to have the completion of their first draft report to us by October 8th. However, we did not receive that. So there's still, there's still some loose ends that they're working on, but I would anticipate this week we will receive it in draft form, and then we'll see what it says and then know where we go from there once that draft is received.
Council comment or discussion? Councilor Menke.
I'm sure everybody in the council is waiting anxious for this report. And I think it's important that we get it as soon as possible. So if you can, Keith, if you can put any pressure on them to get it to us as quickly as possible, that would be a great thing. Because it seems like everything's being held up till this report gets done. And once we get the report, it's going to take us a little time to go through the report and actually digest it, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of details and a lot of data there to look at.
As soon as I get it, you will have it.
Thank you.
Any other council comment or question? All right, I see none. We will move on. The next item is the Mill Pond Park Pool Project Architect. So we have in front of us this evening, we discussed this at our last meeting, the Mill Pond Park Pool Public Building Committee is requesting, and the resolution that's in the packet does not have a dollar amount attached to it. My recollection from last meeting was that it was about a $57,000 expenditure for architecture services. So I'll open it up for discussion on this. Councilor Menke. Oh, you're muted, Councilor Menke.
Is there a reason why there's not a dollar amount that's attached to this? I know we talked about a dollar amount, but it's
James, are you there?
and most of the people who called in seem to think that it's $57,000, but there's nothing here that says that.
Yeah, I think that's both. James, are you there?
I am. When I put it together during your last council meeting, you all discussed issues with extra points on the mappings. So I didn't want to leave that as a solid number. I wanted to be able to allow Mr. Chapman to be able to negotiate should we not need as many. And that is why under the second part of the resolution, you've got that option for the town manager to handle that.
Okay, thank you. Just one other
You're welcome.
quick question.
Sure.
Does this have to go out? Does this have to go out to an RFP? At the rate of
With the
$50,000?
contact that I had with Jeff Barron, the answer was no. Because it's broken down into smaller pieces, it doesn't meet the requirement for the RFP.
But we're still spending the same $57,000. However you break it down.
Right. And that was a question we had from Mr. Barron as well. His indication was because the architect is simply acting as an intermediary for different agents to perform the work. Each of those pieces are single in themselves. So while they have a complete total of 57,000, each of those single pieces is under the threshold of 30,000. That was his understanding as to how he put together his RFP information for us. Originally, we did believe that it needed one. Under his review, it ended up not needing it.
Okay.
So are we paying TLB and then MCA, or are we paying the architect?
I believe they're paying TLB and TLB is paying the subcontractor.
Okay.
And then we're paying MCA for the survey?
Right, they're a separate agency that's being managed through TLB. I know it got really confusing when I was asking the question as well.
Are you all set, Counselor Mankey?
Well, if the motion says we're paying TLB, then it doesn't let us pay MCA. So I guess I'm still confused.
I believe, again, I can't say for sure, but I believe the way this resolution is written, TLB would be the receiver of all payments. They would then disperse it to the subcontractors.
Then in my mind, it would need an RFP because we're paying TLB $57,000.
Well, I mean, Jeff Barron is our purchasing agent, and he's the one who interprets the regulations and the charter and the ordinances. He's not available tonight. This is one of those areas where, until we get the report, I'm not sure you even want to move forward on this, because this may not be your priority after you get the report.
Well, that's my concern is if we get the report and we find there's some other pressing issue that $57,000 could be used for. I'm a little leery about spending that much money for something that I'm not opposed to the pool, but there might be some other priority that's more pressing. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Ennis?
Thank you. Couple things. Would you guys feel more comfortable if we put the dollar amount not to exceed to negotiate and execute an agreement not to exceed the $57,000? First of all, if he has a right to negotiate. The second part is, I mean, we're going to rely on our professionals, Jeff Barron, to make the interpretation of the regulations if we need an RFP or not. And if we rely on our professionals to make decisions for us on other matters, and we're going to need to rely on Jeff to make the right decision on this if an RFP is required or not.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Minor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just in terms of the second paragraph of authorizing Keith to execute and negotiate, I think is probably the more appropriate way to handle this at this point, because he may feel that there's certain aspects of the proposal that are not necessary at this point. However, at least it allows us to continue with some of the work that would be required regardless. And I think I would feel more comfortable with that, to just authorizing him to negotiate an appropriate agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Donahue?
It was for the last meeting when I had talked to Jeff after the meeting, was my understanding that TLB was going to coordinate their piece, but we were going to be able to hire whatever contractor we wanted to do the individual pieces. Now that may be my interpretation of it, but that's what I understood. So, in that thought process, yes, we would be contracting with each individual contractor at the agreed upon price in the quote.
And I believe we just lost the mayor right now. There we are.
We're all having problems tonight.
This is a bad night.
The rain.
I got bumped off and back in. Is that what happened to everyone, or?
That's it's been happening to me all night.
Okay.
Yep.
So I apologize, Mr. Donahue, Counselor Donahue. I didn't hear all of your comments. I just heard the very beginning.
What I had said was during my, conversation with Jeff after the meeting, the last committee meeting we had, was that we were going to be responsible for hiring the contractors to do the individual pieces, based on what's in the quote. We'd probably go with the recommended architect, or the recommendations of the architect, but we were free to, choose a local guy, whatever we wanted to do. And that's how we arrived at the, doesn't need to go out for RFP because we're spending, we're going to contract each individual piece. My understanding, it could be like
If
getting the
that's the
whole story.
case,
That's what I understood.
I think I would say that if that's the case, that Jeff said that after the meeting, that his thinking probably was that the other subcontractors or contractors are not going to meet the level where a bid or an RFP is required dollar-wise. And if they're under that, then you don't have to take an action to waive the RFP process or the bid process. They just fall underneath the $30,000. And so therefore, administration can just hire those as long as they're comfortable that that's in the best interest of the town. So I think that's probably why it's not requiring a bid waiver or a dollar amount.
I will verify that with Jeff, but that's my understanding.
That's the understanding.
Counselor Mankey?
Yeah, again, I'm not disparaging anybody, any of our professional staff. So I want to make that clear. It just is confusing to me. We're passing a motion or resolution that's going to award TLB Architects $57,000, which, however you slice it, is over the limit. If it's meant so much for this one and so much for this one, then the motion should say that. The way it's said now, even if we take Councilor Anna's suggestion and put the not to exceed $57,000, the motion's for $57,000, which is
but I
above
think,
what would be for an RFP.
But I think, Tim, the issue is TLB would be the architect on the project, but the work such as the surveying and so forth would be done by other contractors and paid directly to those other contractors, which then results in the price per entity to be less than the $30,000 and therefore does not require a RFP or a bid waiver or a bid. I think that's what Jeff was getting at with John.
Again, I'll leave that to the professionals. I'm not an expert in RFP, but it seems kind of unclear to me.
Thank you, Counselor Mankey. Counselor Minor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. James, this is a question for you or Keith, James, whoever. Is there a way that we can edit the resolution to state a cumulative sum total in a not to exceed amount of $35,000 per entity involved? There's three entities. I believe there's, John, you'd remember this better than I. Geotechnical was one. I think survey was a second, and then the physical architecture was being done by TLB. Am I remembering this right?
Yeah, that's what I recall. But I mean, I can't put my hands on the package from last time, but there were, many contractors under that, right?
There was three.
So can we amend the resolution to state a do not exceed amount of $35,000 for any one entity to be prescribed under, three company or three contracts for, geotechnical survey, and then the physical architecture? Does that make sense or no?
No. Yeah. Beth, Bill DeMayo's on. I don't know if you know that.
I just saw him pop in. If we have questions for him, we can ask. He just popped in.
He might have the answers to the vendors.
The limit is $30,000, not $35,000.
Oh, stand corrected. Sorry, Keith.
That's okay.
Counselor Annis, your hand is next.
Yeah, now I don't remember what I was gonna say. Oh, yeah. I know Bill is on, so he might be able to answer the questions, but keep the monies to pay the 57,000. I know one of the individuals on public participation in the beginning asked where those monies were gonna be coming from. They're coming from the parks budget, am I correct?
It has not been decided yet. I talked to Janet today on that. That's something that we're going to look at because there are some funds available in the operating budget that will not be expended out of the parks. So it may come out of that area or through the enterprise fund that Bill has.
Okay. Thank you.
So looking at what's on this list, though, I don't see any of it exceeding, if you pay directly to those three vendors, none of it requires a RFP or bid. They're all under the $30,000 level.
Right.
Counselor Mankey?
Yeah, I'll yield the RFP debate. Still don't understand it, but I'll yield it. My other issue is we just had this long, drawn out discussion about CIP and how we're facing some real financial problems. And I'm a little bit leery, I guess, of spending $50,000 or $57,000 for a plan when I could wait a couple of weeks and get the facility studies and see if this is the most critical need for our town. If it isn't, then we should spend our money on what's most critical. And right now, I'm assuming the pool is the most critical, and I would guess that would be the case, but I don't know for sure. So I'm a little bit concerned that we're going to spend, like we just talked about, we're just throwing money here and throwing money there without having a plan. And I guess I'd rather have a plan than just spend $57,000. We can spend it next week or we can spend it next month. But I want to know what the plan is first.
Counselor Camillo?
Well, it seems like there's a little bit of confusion here in the way the resolution's written. Why don't we send it back and let Jeff Behrens and Ben Ancona take a look at it? And we can vote on it at our next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Counselor, Deputy Mayor Bedrejko?
Okay, I'm not gifted in math, but a few minutes earlier, the discussion was well, first of all, I'm not comfortable with putting a resolution through without a not to exceed amount in no matter what it applies to. But then we were talking about amending the resolution to say for each of these three entities not to exceed per entity $30,000. Am I correct? So realistically, 3 times 30 is $90,000. So I would not want that worded that way. And the cap has got to be 57.5, split however it might be among these three entities, but.
Right. Okay, I'm trying not to jump in because I have a lot to say too, but it's hard. I usually try to let you guys have your say first. So I'm going to go to the next person in line, which is Counselor Minor.
No, by all means, feel free to weigh in and I'll wait.
No, go ahead. That's fine.
No, I think the spirit of what I was trying to get at before was just that no one individual contract were to not exceed 30,000 for a maximum expenditure of 57,150. That's what I was trying to get at.
Okay.
So not to say 90,000, no, just a maximum expenditure of 57,150 with no individual component to exceed 30,000.
Okay, so all those figures have to be in there, yeah.
Correct. And my only, it's not even a rebuttal, my only reply to Tim would be, unfortunately, with the water consumption that we've used over the past several years, to not at least to continue the advancement of this, to me is not being the most responsible in terms of the dollars that we have now. Unfortunately, they've expended hundreds of thousands of gallons of water that we're just not seeing as a line item, but it's dollars coming out of our budget. So that's the only thing I had to say to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Menke.
I agree, Chris, but the problem is if we're spending $57,000 and this doesn't build us a new pool. So we'll spend this money, and what if the report comes back that we need a new firehouse? And that's the most critical issue. Then we have to do the firehouse because that's obviously more critical on the list of repairs or things, facilities that need to get worked on. So I'm a little bit leery of voting on spending any money until we have the facility report to find out what's most important. Because this study doesn't, this study alone, in a sense, just draws us a map of the park. It doesn't build us a pool. It doesn't set anything up for referendum. It just draws us a map of the park. And I would rather wait to see what the other issues that might be facing us that are maybe just as critical. I assume the pool is probably the most critical. If we're losing that much water and the pool is being used by that many people, this is an important thing. But I don't know right now, and that's what I guess I would suggest we table this for a couple of meetings and then see what the report says.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in just really quickly and say that I don't want to vote no this evening, but I do have some reservations about voting prior to having that report, especially after the several items right ahead of this. That report keeps coming back up as we need to prioritize, we need to know, we need to plan ahead. And so I kind of agree with what Councilor Menke is saying, that the 57,000, listen, I've been on this council for a number of years and on the Board of Ed before that, and I can not even think to count how many studies we've done that have then been put on a shelf. You know, and I don't want to have that happen here, and I also don't want to vote no. So what I would suggest is that we consider tabling this item, not voting on it tonight, so that there's no votes, because that's not, I don't think that's what any of us want, but perhaps tabling it for I would suggest till the end of November, so that we have that first November meeting to discuss the facilities study and get it, and then have some time to process that, and perhaps discuss this at the end of November again would be my thought process, what I think might make sense, so that we make sure when we move this forward that we're doing it the right way, and whether that makes sense now or in the future, and we can have a little more information before we go ahead and take the vote. That would be my consideration and my suggestion to the council. I know we have a few more hands up, so let me go to Councilor Nagel next.
Yes, I agree. This resolution, what we've been talking about, adding and changing and so on, is getting more and more convoluted to make a decision tonight and to be clear. And therefore, I'd agree that perhaps we should table it for that reason. And from what Mr. Chapman has told us earlier on, we should have that facilities report within a week or two, so that we can clarify and reemphasize that this is an important thing to do. And I'm in agreement. I do not want to vote no on this. My comments are merely to get it right, to get it clear, and to make certain that we have looked at that facilities, a document that all of us have been clamoring for, and that has tonight has been attached to almost everything that we've talked about, except possibly the health update. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Nagel. Councilor Anist?
Keith, when you did the facilities report, I missed the timeline of when the report is due in your hands.
The last correspondence we received last week from Owens was that it would be to us by November 8th. I mean, excuse me, let me just double check.
October 8th, which is coming on. That was in the report.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you've had conversation with them since then.
No, we were hoping to have it now for tonight, but it didn't show up. So.
And you haven't had a conversation with them today?
Not today, no.
Okay. And then do you know if that report is going to have priorities, like their recommendations of priorities? So we'll know right off the hop what they're recommending for us?
I can't say for sure what it's going to have until we actually see it. That's why it's a draft. It may or may not meet our expectations. And, we really have to look at the draft to see, and then request a final copy that is laid out exactly how we want it.
Okay, I'm sorry, because my computer kept freezing up, so I was missing dialogue, so I didn't mean to jump in and ask those questions, but I just wanted them answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we certainly did ask for, our intent with the study was to get priorities, but as Mr. Chapman mentioned, we'll have to see what the draft comes through as. Counselor Mankey.
Locked up again.
I'm locked up.
Not
We
now.
can hear you.
You're back, I think.
I'm
Tim's
back.
back.
Counselor Mankey, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was locked out too. It must be this end of town. I'll meet you in Starbucks, Carol. We'll do it there.
Yeah, this is ridiculous. I'm missing half the meeting.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. This is kind of crazy, but my point is, if we wait a couple of weeks, we'll have more information we have now. I can remember not too long after I got elected to the council, we had this meeting to talk about the plan for Churchill Park, and some of us remember that we did the tour of Churchill Park, and that plan, whatever we paid for that plan, it's sitting on a shelf now again because it wasn't a priority at that point, and we had other priorities. So I guess I would move we table this until we can get the facility report. Certainly no later than the end of November. We should talk about it then, but I'd like to at least get a chance to take a look at that facility report first. And I think it's the only way we can do it. If it comes for a vote today, I'm not sure I can support it.
Counselor Mankey, I heard you use the word move. Are you making a formal motion?
I would move this be tabled until the end of November, or to our second meeting in November.
Second.
Which is the 20th, whatever.
Second, by Counselor Braverman. We're going to discuss now because there's a motion on the table. So we'll continue for anyone that has to discuss the motion. And the next hand up is Counselor Minor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will agree with Tim if we're going to set a definitive date that we're going to deal with this. I don't want to just shelf it without putting something on the backside to say, up until this point, we're going to make a decision, whatever that date may be. If you're good with the second meeting in November, then I'm fine with that. I would just rather see some type of inclusatory decision as to when to end it. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Anist?
Yeah, I mean, I would ask that we keep this on the agenda for our next meeting and our next meeting, because if the report comes in and there is some definitive information, then we can continue this dialogue and not have to wait to the end of November.
Okay. I mean, I agree with that. It's not a matter of putting it off for a certain amount of time, but more a matter of putting it off if we can until we get that facilities report.
Right, so I think we should just leave it on the agenda as old business, as a line item.
Counselor Mankey?
Yeah, I just want to be clear. I'm not opposed to the pool project. I just want to see what all my projects are before I spend money on any of them at this point. I think that's the fiscal responsible way to go.
Counselor Deputy Mayor Bedrejko?
Yeah, I agree with tabling it, but in the interim, would James be able to redo this, the proposal or the resolution to include what we talked about tonight with the dollar amounts?
Certainly can, and I'll have the transcript of this, so we'll have it exactly as everybody's talked about.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Tim, your motion says to table it, I believe you said until the end of November. Do you want to modify that at all based on the
I
discussion?
think my motion would be until November 24th at the latest. That'd be our second meeting in November, I believe. My calendar's right.
Yes.
Okay. And that, I mean, your original motion did say the second meeting in November, so that would be the same. But I will say, in terms of agenda setting, it's Carol and Tim and myself that are typically there, knowing that we can do it sooner than that if the facilities report comes through. Is that a
correct? We can always change it, right?
All right.
And I do agree with Councilor Minor. I don't want to just let this thing sit and do nothing. We need to take action on it, but I want to get all my facts before I can make an educated vote.
Right. Any other discussion before we take a vote? Seeing none, we'll go to a roll call, please, Susan. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Annis. I'm sorry, Susan. Councilor Annis, did you want to get in there? Go ahead.
That's okay. Tim, would you be willing to amend your motion to discuss it on or before that meeting? I just don't want to have that motion saying on November 24th, and we have the report and we can discuss it in 2 weeks.
I believe we can put it on the, seeing as we meet to do the agenda anyway, we can put it on the agenda anytime we want. I'm using the 24th as a last date of not as we have to discuss it by that date.
Okay, so we need to discuss it by November 24th.
Right. The other thing we need to know, though, if this is we have one more meeting in October, and then we'll have to have some time to digest the report. But I'm saying no later than November 24th. So by that time, it should be, yeah, we can put it on the agenda anytime we want in the next 3 meetings.
Well, the way our luck is, we might have the report tomorrow, so.
Yeah, the way we're going, well, and if that's the case, it's probably going to freeze up on my computer anyway. I won't be able to read it until 2 weeks from now anyway.
All right, so Councilor Menke's motion is to table this item to a date no later than November 24th. Ms. Braverman, is that your second as well?
Yes, that's fine.
All right. So we've had our discussion. We'll go to roll call vote. Sorry, Susan, but you're up now. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilor Annis,
Yes.
Councilor Braverman,
Yes.
Councilor Boudreaux,
Yes.
Councilor Camillo,
Yes.
Councilor Donahue,
Yes.
Councilor Menke,
Yes.
Councilor Minor,
Yes.
Councilor Nagel,
Yes.
Mayor Del Buono.
Yes.
9-0.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. That was a great discussion. Moving on to the next item, which is the FitLot Grant Agreement Authorization. And my understanding of this is that we did act on this previously, but the way it was written was to authorize the prior town manager to take action. So tonight is a formality to do the resolution so that we are authorizing the current town manager, Mr. Chapman, to take action. Is that accurate, Mr. Chapman?
Yes, the only thing I will add to that is that there's an opportunity for us to obtain additional funding if we go through with this resolution tonight, to have a fitness program, 54 sessions that will be paid for through this phase 2 grant, we'll say. So we'll be getting an additional $4,010 for this coming year for fitness programming for 54 sessions, which is, it's for anyone over the age of 18. So pretty good deal.
That's wonderful.
And
All
that will continue, I think, for 3 years.
Good.
Would someone like to read the motion in and then we can continue discussion if there is any? Councilor Menke?
I'll read it. Resolved that Newington Town Council hereby authorizes Keith Chapman, Town Manager, to execute the FitLot Partnership Agreement, Programmatic Grant Amendment, Addendum, and any additional documents for the construction of a FitLot outdoor fitness park located at the Clem Lemire Sports Complex.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Nagel. All right, any other discussion on this item? It's a pretty straightforward one. All right, seeing no discussion, we'll go to a roll call vote, please.
Councilor Annis,
Yes.
Councilor Braverman,
Yes.
Councilor Draco,
Yes.
Councilor Camillo,
Yes.
Councilor Donahue,
Yes.
Councilor Menke,
Yes.
Councilor Minor,
Yes.
Councilor Nagel,
Yes.
Mayor Del Buono.
Yes.
9-0.
Wonderful. Thank you, Susan. All right, we will go on. Our next item is the Affordable Housing Plan Grant Technical Assistance Program Acceptance. Excuse me. Mr. Chapman, if you would go ahead with this one.
Yes, you had authorized us to apply for this grant several months ago. It's for $15,000. We're already doing the study. So this will assist in paying for that. We originally went forward not knowing if we would get this grant, but since we got it, that will help the town of Newington out. And that's essentially it.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. We do have a resolution in the packet. Who could go ahead and read that for me? Someone?
I'll do it.
Counselor Mankey, you're the go-to guy tonight. Thank
I
you.
must be the resolve. I'm the resolve guy. Until I freeze up and then you're on your own. Resolved that the Newington Town Council hereby authorizes Keith Chapman, Town Manager, to execute all documents necessary to accept the Affordable Housing Plan Technical Assistance Grant Award. A copy of the notice of the grant award shall be attached to this resolution.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Nagel. And discussion on this item. All right, I don't see any hands up, so we'll go ahead with the roll call vote, please.
Counselor Anist,
Yes.
Counselor Braverman,
Yes.
Counselor Budraco,
Yes.
Counselor Camillo,
Yes.
Counselor Donahue,
Yes.
Counselor Mankey,
Yes.
Counselor Minor,
Yes.
Counselor Nagel,
Yes.
Mayor Del Buono.
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. I use the tape, I'm getting my hand sanitizer. I just want you all to know I'm following the rules, okay? All right, the next item is sale of town-owned property. The address is 69 Cedar Street. We did have a public hearing earlier this evening on this item. Mr. Chapman, if you would.
Yes, this particular action being requested is to authorize me to enter into a purchase agreement with the proposed buyer of the property. And that proposed buyer is Anthony Properties Realty out of Dallas, Texas. And they would be purchasing the old National Welding property, which is just under 4 acres, 3.99 acres. They would be purchasing for a price of $1,470,000. Once this is signed, they will provide a $100,000 deposit into an escrow account. If the seller, us, fails to perform, then that deposit would be returned to the buyer. If the buyer fails to perform, then that deposit would be held by the town. There's a lot of, I think you've all received copies of the purchase agreement proposal that has been reviewed by the town attorney. The buyer is waiting for word on whether you approve this tonight or not.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. We did hear earlier during our public hearing from a member of the public who wanted information on the sale. This was briefly discussed at a prior town council meeting. It's also, as mentioned in our memo, we did complete our TPZ referral process, the 8-24. The TPZ did issue a favorable report back. So we have, in terms of our council duty, done our due diligence for what we need to do in terms of the sale of property. It's our job as a council merely to decide whether or not the town wishes to sell the property, but not to necessarily determine how the property would be used. That would then go to town council following the sale with whatever the buyer would come forward with as a plan. So I just wanted to clarify that in terms of the action that the council is taking tonight. Mr. Chapman, is there anything else I omitted or should add?
Well, it would go to the Planning Zoning Commission. You had said the town council, but it would go to Planning Zone.
Thank you. That is exactly what I meant.
The only thing I would say at this point is that it's the intent of the buyer is to develop a Class A market rate transit-oriented multifamily community. It would have indoor parking with a wraparound style building. That's about all we can actually say at this point, because the rest of it is going to be forwarded when they are ready to submit their plans to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So I haven't seen the actual plans that they've developed. And they probably don't have those plans prepared, because until you take an action, they don't know if they're going to be buying the property. So they're ready to buy it if you're ready to sell it.
Thank you. I will say this is a property that has been sitting on our tax rolls collecting no taxes for many years now. And this council has made several attempts to sell the property or get people interested in the property. And we have not had a ton of interest in the past. We've had a few. And so, you know, I'm very pleased that we have someone as interested as Anthony Properties is. And the fact that we have an agreement that we've reached, the town manager has reached, and we have this under consideration, this would put that property back on our tax rolls. And we would hopefully be able to move forward with some sort of development there. And what that is remains to be seen as it goes through the process. But to me, this makes a lot of sense for our town in getting this back on our tax rolls as an active taxpayer. So I'm hoping the council will consider moving this forward this evening. Councilor Minor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Keith, you had just stated that we had gotten the executed copy back from Attorney Ancona. Mike, did I hear that properly?
You all have received the reviewed copy of the agreement to purchase and sale of the real property that is waiting for my signature if you authorize me to sign it. So it was in your folder that was sent out to you all.
Okay, I don't think I saw it. Okay, let me take a look because I don't think I saw it.
Councilors, did anyone not receive it?
I didn't get it either.
I didn't get it either.
I didn't get it.
I didn't either.
We received an email, just Keith, from you saying that the agreement had been reached, but I don't believe that there was an attachment with the actual agreement in it, other than you saying it was based on the terms that were discussed.
James, that was not sent out to them?
That was added to their share folders for their computer. So the same location that you get your packet in, that document was in there as well.
Oh, okay.
I
So
did
we're all
ask for
probably
stuff
looking
not
at our
to be-
emails.
Yeah, and I can't get into my shared folder.
Okay.
And I've said that before.
Who hasn't received it? I can send you out a copy of it.
I haven't either, and I honestly I don't want to try to digest this in 2 minutes.
Oh.
Well,
I do want to be clear though. I fully support the sale of the property as long as we're representing the best interest of the sale. I have no quorums with the sale from what's been discussed to this point, but I don't have any terms or anything to go off of.
It was my understanding that it was sent out to all of you. The only thing I can say at this point is the town attorney has reviewed it and approved it. We really need to move on this tonight.
The agreement was added, I'm just pulling it up on my other computer. It was added to our folders this evening, a few hours ago.
Get it?
What?
An agreement from Ben and Connor.
Are there any, were there any changes made, substantive changes from what was discussed previously, Mr.
None.
Chapman?
None.
Mayor,
Yes.
that document was added to the folder on October the 8th. It only shows up on your system when you've received it through from your update.
Ah, okay. Yeah, okay, I apologize. That folder is the agenda and minutes, you know, it's kind of listed in there, but it's not something I would have known to have looked for, so I apologize for that. Counselor Anist.
Thank you. I'm sorry, because I was having technical difficulties during the public hearing. Before the public had a chance to discuss this, Keith, did you make a presentation?
No.
So the public had no idea what the public hearing was about? I mean, what the terms of the sale of the property? I'm not against this, I'm in favor of it, but I just want to make sure that, you know, the town realizes that there was this public hearing and what the terms of the sale.
In terms of the sale, I just went over with you,
Right, to us, but you didn't do it during the public hearing, and I usually, public hearings, you do like a little presentation first.
I wasn't asked to, and I
Oh,
didn't
okay.
do that, no.
Okay.
So,
Counselor Menke.
So the terms are basically what we discussed previously.
yes,
Again, I think I'm in favor of selling the property. It's been sitting vacant for years and years and years. This puts it back on the tax roll, and I can understand the need to move forward quickly. The decision of what's built there and how it's built and the makeup of whatever is built there is still subject to TPZ approval and scrutiny. So I'm not too concerned about the details of what's being built there at this point, as opposed to to not sell the land means we're just sitting there with a big 3 acre, 4 acre sort of hole on our tax base. So I would be in favor of moving ahead.
It's rebooting.
Oh, okay.
Any other Counselor Minor?
I'm sorry to keep going back on this, but I think this is probably one of the most important things that we're going to have in our 2 years is without having an opportunity to review it. I mean, I don't know the terms within it is there a right of rescission on our part if the developer doesn't meet a timeline? I mean, none of this is all stuff that really should be considered before there's an action taken. I know that, former Councilor Costello had questioned whether or not there was any affordable housing built into it, or at least percentage base, because by percentage, our housing stock is on that 10% threshold based on that. So if we increase our number of units, that means we have to increase our number of affordable units, and we just keep carrying this unless it's at least considered at some point. And we're just talking about a study that we're in the process of affordable housing. Again, I want to be clear. I support the sale of the property, but I just have concerns about doing it in such a hasty fashion. I know that the developer had to extend his timeline due to some considerations on their part, and I would respectfully request the same on our part.
All right. Counselor Menke?
Well, first of all, if the information is put in our packet and we as counselors didn't read it, that's on us. I don't think we can sell property to someone and then tell them what they're gonna do with it per se. That's really the TPZ's responsibility. But to move this along, would it be possible to just postpone this and call a special meeting for Thursday to consider this matter?
You took the words right out of my mouth, Counselor Menke.
I'm okay with that.
I agree.
Mr. Chapman, does that work for you?
yeah, I have to apologize. I assumed that you all had received it and read it over because I didn't hear back from anybody that they didn't receive it or not read it over. So a lack of communication apparently. But no, if you want to do that, I can let the prospective buyer know tomorrow morning that it's been delayed. And hopefully he says, okay.
I'm just trying to go in order of the hands raised. I apologize. Counselor Minor.
Thank you. I am not at all opposed of a special meeting on this. My only concern is that the public hearing really didn't allow the public to understand, what's being proposed. And what I don't want to have is a nightmare created on the backside of there being a backlash in terms of us making such a hasty decision with having 2 public attendees in a Zoom meeting. That's my concern. And again, as far as documentation not getting to us, each correspondence regarding this sale was done in an email form, and this was the first time it was put into the share drive packet, so I wasn't even frankly looking for it. So I have no problem to come in for a special meeting, but I'd at least like some consideration for a public hearing to at least explain it a little bit better. I don't know what anybody else's thought is on that.
I'm just hang on.
If I may, just for clarifications, are you as a council seeking to have detail on the sale of the land or detail as well on the proposed development?
Oh, the land.
Just the land.
The sale of the land is the item here, and that's what is under our purview to consider at this point.
Exactly, just the land.
And so we did hold the public hearing earlier. I understand the concern. We had previously discussed it broadly at a council meeting. So there were some details out there. I'm not opposed to a special meeting. I think that's probably our best bet is to do it on Thursday evening. But to delay it and try and do a second public hearing, I don't know that that makes sense. We can do a presentation and public can have input at the special meeting after hearing the discussion tonight, and then the discussion at the special meeting on Thursday. We could certainly have a public participation built in.
Be the only thing on the agenda.
Right.
Councilor Mankey, your hand is up.
Right. That's my point. If we have this on the agenda on Thursday, people who want to discuss it or want public participation on Thursday, that gives them 2 days to digest, and it gives us a time to read this, read the terms. I would just ask that if we just make sure we all read the terms and we're ready to go, but just have a one item on the agenda for Thursday, and we'll do this quickly. It just delays it a couple days. It will be okay.
Yeah, just to be clear for the public's understanding, we did discuss the details of this contract already in executive, as is typical practice when you're negotiating a deal. It falls under executive privilege under real estate. And so the council is not unaware of the details. It's just that we haven't seen the formal written document. But as several councilors mentioned earlier, we do in some regard have to trust the powers that be. And if our attorney reviewed it as well as the town manager, then this hopefully will be a matter of just going through and discussing one more time and letting the public have their say, which I think is important for sure. Councilor Anist.
Question, if this is on the agenda for Thursday, we already held the public hearing. Can the public still comment on it? Even though it's, how does that work?
If there's public participation, there's nothing saying member of the public can't comment on an item. So
because we had a public hearing on it, so I just want to make sure that that's okay. And if we do this Thursday, can we get something, a blast out or something out so residents know what's going on? I think this has been kind of quiet, which I can't understand why it was so quiet, but it has been quiet out there. And I don't think a lot of people know that this property is going to be sold. I think everybody's going to be happy that it's sold, but I think our residents have a right to, if they want to chime in and say what they want to say, to be able to do that. And I'm not opposed to having a special meeting on Thursday and to give us an opportunity to review the P&S.
Councilor Minor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, again, I have no problem with a special meeting on Thursday. The only open question I've got that I know is going to come up is, at this point, now that we have a tentative agreement that is gone back and forth and is in place, are the terms of the sale available to be digested by the public or no? That's a Keith question or James question. I don't know whose question.
You mean the agreement for purchase and sale? Would that
Correct.
be the document?
Correct, the document itself. Because generally, at least my past experience, like, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that was something that was known in advance.
I think we'd have to reach out to Attorney Ancona and see where we stand with that and what the procedure is, because I don't recall having that level of detail out prior to reaching the agreement. That's typically an executive, and then the basics of it have been discussed. So we'd have to probably check on that with Attorney Ancona prior to Thursday to see what we are able to release.
Okay, because I thought with the sale with the property adjacent to Fenn Road that document and that information was for public consumption in advance of the public hearing, but I could be mistaken on that. That's just the way I remember that.
I only remember talking about the sale price, but I'm not
Okay.
100% sure of that, so we
That's
can
always-
certainly
Okay.
get that opinion.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Counselor Nagel?
Thank you. Conversations went in another direction between the time I raised my hand and now. I just want to add that I agree that Thursday is, I'm amenable to having a Thursday meeting. And yes, definitely the public can speak to the one item in this case that's on the special meeting agenda. And so there is that opportunity to speak at that time. And if the public has decided to stay and listen to this meeting, they've gained a great deal more information than they had earlier. And if the word gets out that it's out there, they can look at the minutes of this meeting or indeed a rebroadcast of this and get the information that they asked. And also that some things that they've asked we can't speak to at this point. And it is up to others to do that and to have that discussion or that information presented later because we don't want to put in jeopardy the sale. I don't think anybody just generally wants that to happen. Thanks.
Thank you. Counselor Menke?
I think we're all in agreement. We don't want to jeopardize the sale and we don't want to delay this any longer. So I would make a motion. We have a special meeting on Thursday to discuss the sale of the 690 Cedar Street.
Second.
Before we pass that, could we have a specific time for that meeting?
I would call for the meeting at 6:30.
That works for me.
I'm good.
Fine.
All right. I don't believe we need to make a motion for a special meeting. It's the mayor's, under the council rules, the mayor can request that. So I'll just go ahead and request that officially on the record for a
Good.
special meeting on Thursday at 6:30, specific to one agenda item, which would be the sale of town-owned property 690 Cedar Street. James, do you need any other information from us before we move on?
No, that is fine.
All right, thank you. We will now move on to new business. And the first item under new business is the Community Connectivity Grant Program, CCGP. There is this evening before us a waiver requested for this item. This is requesting that the council authorize the application to the Connecticut Community Connectivity Grant Program to install 900 feet of sidewalk along Main Street from the transfer station to Lewis Street. The grant application needs to be submitted no later than October 16th, 2020, which is why there's been a request for a waiver of the rules of procedure to take action this evening on this item. So let's see, I need first a motion to waive the rules. Someone motion to waive the rules, please.
So moved.
Do it.
Thank you, Councilor Nagel. Seconded by Councilor Anist.
Yep.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion to waive? Seeing none, can we do a roll call vote, please, Susan?
Yeah, Counselor Anist,
Yes.
Counselor Braverman,
Yes.
Counselor Budraco,
Yes.
Counselor Camillo,
Yes.
Counselor Donahue,
Yes.
Counselor Menke,
Yes.
Counselor Minor,
Yes.
Counselor Nagel,
Yes.
Mayor Del Buono,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you. So we are going to waive the rules to take action on this item tonight. The next order of business is to actually have the motion put on the table for the item, which is the Community Connectivity Grant Program. Who can read that in for me?
I'll read it.
Thank you.
Resolved, the Newington Town Council hereby authorizes Keith Chapman, Town Manager, to execute the endorsement and recommendations of the Connecticut Connectivity Community Grant Program for the Main Street Sidewalk Connectivity Project.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Menke. So now we'll discuss this as a council, and then we'll offer the public a chance to participate as well prior to the vote. Mr. Chapman, could you give us a little more background on this other than what I read from the memo?
Yes, this came up fairly recently. I know the council was concerned that there was a public hearing that occurred last week on this. On your memo from Gary, you'll see that the grant solicitation announcement came out on August 28th of this year, which left us very little time to get prepared to take a look at where we'd like to have an extension of sidewalk. So we developed a plan to address 900 feet of sidewalk from the current transfer station entrance up to the existing sidewalk near Lewis Street. And we, because of the timing on this, there was very little time. So we did have a public hearing on it, and now it's before you. And the application is due on the 16th of this month. I mean, they did not give us any time to get this prepared, which in a way works to our advantage because we were ready to move on something like this if something like this came along. So what it is, there's 900 feet of concrete sidewalk being proposed. There'll be 2 sidewalk ramps, handicapped ramps installed. There'll be 300 foot of bituminous curbing where their existing guardrail is removed. And 1 catch basin, relocate 2 utility poles, landscape and restore the site for a cost of about $525,000 in construction. We will be responsible for the design. So we're requesting $525,000 for that construction activity. This will connect Main Street up to Lewis. And then we've also asked ConDOT to consider through their traffic signal improvements to add 200 feet of sidewalk from Lewis Street to the Berlin Turnpike. If all this occurs, then with the improvements being made at the traffic signal systems on the Turnpike, we will now then have a safe way of crossing the Turnpike from where Walgreens is on Griswoldville. So that part of the town now will have a access with sidewalks across the Turnpike and right down to the center of town. So it's a good opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Questions by the council or discussion? Deputy Mayor Bedrejko?
Yes, I attended that presentation by Gary, and it was quite informative. And I applaud him for going after a grant like this. It certainly, fits the need, fits that area of town. There's that gap. The sidewalk goes all the way up, from Churchill Park to the recycling center to the, and then it just stops. But there's neighborhoods there like Hopkins Village, or even in the Churchill Bridge condos, that this would make walkable distance to, Price Chopper and the retail area right off of Lewis Street. Also, it would make a nice way for people who live in the condos off of Lewis Street, to come and get to the park. Because right now, that 900-foot gap, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it is very dangerous. In fact, last night I was coming back from Price Chopper and I saw 3 teenagers trying to navigate walking back down from Price Chopper towards Churchill Park, and it was extremely dangerous. The cars were coming on one side, it was getting dark. I personally think it's a good investment. It's a good project. It would also help, people in the park. They can make a whole circle around going up to Lewis Street, down Lewis Street, back behind on Willard, and up to Clem Lemire. It would just enhance the whole area, and it connects some of the neighborhoods to each other, to the park, and also to the retail center without having to get in their cars. It's a very unsafe area. I've tried walking it and riding my bike myself, and this will enhance the safety, and the fact that we're getting assistance from the state certainly does help, so I support it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilor Minor. Councilor Minor, you're muted right now.
His connection's gone.
Chris, we're having trouble hearing you.
Yeah, I also just, this is an excellent opportunity. Hello? Hello?
Chris, are you there?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Now I can, yep.
Okay, just I'll make it fast before I freeze up again. The opportunity on this is, I think, perfect for what we're doing. This is not an aesthetic project. This is a functional project of creating safer passage for pedestrians and bicycles to be able to use a section of Main Street, a main thoroughfare, in a safe manner where they haven't been able to. So I can 100% endorse this, and hopefully we'll be able to get the funding from DOT to complete the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Minor. Just in the nick of time. You were just fading out on that last word. Councilor Menke.
Yeah, I just would, Keith, just please pass on our thanks to Gary for finding this project and getting this grant ready to go so fast. I think this is an example of a town employee who takes initiative and finds something that we can sink our teeth into. I think we're all in favor of moving this forward, but make sure you give him our thanks.
I will convey that to him, yes.
Thank you. All right, if there's no further council comment, we're going to open it up to the public. Because we are waiving the rules by our town council rules of procedure, we allow the public to weigh in on these items. So in terms of the connectivity grant, the public may, let's see, we have Ms. Lyons. Ms. Lyons, you should be able to unmute now.
Hi, it's Rose Lyons, 46 Elton Drive. I too attended the public information meeting on the connectivity plan for that 900 feet of sidewalk. I think it's a great idea. I am at Middlewoods of Newington at least 2 or 3 times a week, and I see people walking that area, and I think it's a great idea to connect it. I'm just hoping that our vision for what the DOT will do across the Berlin Turnpike is also the DOT's vision. I expressed to Gary at that meeting that my vision would be to make the signage near our transfer station a little bit better, or even have some kind of a light, a flashing light or something, because I don't use the transfer station, but I do travel the road, and the cars, trucks come out of there, and sometimes you don't know where, that they're coming until you're right on top of them. That being said, once again, I'm going to ask the question in the application. It asks if the town has a connectivity plan. It was stated that the reason it took so long to get this plan in motion and get it to the table for you for approval tonight for it being submitted on the 16th is that they had to decide where they wanted it to be. Wouldn't it be a good idea to have some sort of a plan as to the various sidewalks in town that need to be connected and prioritize what needs to be done? And then we can act on it as soon as these grants are made available. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lyons. I see another member of the public with her hand up. Again, for the public, this is where you can weigh in on the connectivity grant. And the next person I see is Ms. Francolino.
Eileen Franklino, 116 Lidle. Can you hear me? Am I good?
Yes.
Yeah.
My only question is, I think this sounds like a great project. I'm just curious if there's hidden costs for the town.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any other members of the public. Mr. Chapman, did you want to respond to any of those questions?
Yeah, the cost to the town are going to be the design costs that we'll do in-house. But beyond that, most everything will be covered under the $525 construction cost grant. I will also say that the whole program is in part of the 2030 town plan of development. There is a page or two dedicated to the sidewalks that are not in place at this time throughout the whole town. And there's a priority of which sidewalks would be sought to be installed initially. And this is one of those sidewalks. So yes, there is a plan in place. It's part of the plan of development that is available for viewing. So this is one of a number of sidewalks that we would like to see installed at some point to put to have the town connected for pedestrians and bicyclists.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chapman. I don't see any other members of the public with their hand up, so we will go ahead and take our vote, please, Susan.
Counselor Anist,
Yes.
Counselor Braverman,
Yes.
Counselor Budraco,
Yes.
Counselor Camillo,
Yes.
Counselor Donahue,
Yes.
Counselor Menke,
Yes.
Counselor Minor,
Yes.
Counselor Nagel,
Yes.
Mayor Del Buono,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you. All right, we will move on. Our next item under new business is update on municipal tax collection. I believe this was requested at our agenda setting meeting. And in our packets, we have a memo from Ms. Murphy, our Director of Finance. Mr. Chapman, do you want to go over this?
Yeah, just briefly, we all were concerned about the tax collection rate with the deferred 3-month program and the state of the economy due to COVID-19. And I'm happy to report that we're pretty much on track in all areas as compared to what we would normally expect. So at this stage of the game, the COVID-19 situation has not adversely impacted on our collection rate. And the deferment of the 3 months has not adversely impacted. So at this point, things look pretty good. Now, with COVID-19 coming back, all bets are off in the future. But at this point, we're in pretty good shape. Very close to our normal collection rates.
Great. I see that Ms. Murphy, our Finance Director, is on the line with us as well. Good evening, Janet.
Good evening.
Do you have anything you wanted to add?
Yep, I mean, Keith is basically on the mark. As of October 1st, we are about 0.5% behind last year's collection, mainly in the motor vehicle areas. Our big ones were behind. Revenue-wise, that's about approximately, $500,000 to $550,000 are behind in collection. That being said, the tax collector's office was still collecting postmarked payments after that time. So we are expecting that we will catch up. The delinquent notices that we sent out this year were approximately the same number as last year. So I think we are really close to being very much on track.
Okay, that's
Awesome.
great news. Any council comment or question? I don't see anybody's hand raised. Thank you, Ms. Murphy, for hanging on in with us this evening. I know it's been a long meeting.
No problem.
All right, have a good evening. Thank you.
You too.
All right, folks, that is our last agenda item under new business. We will move on to resignations and appointments. I believe we have 2 this evening. Councilor Menke, would you please?
Certainly. Resolved, the Newington Town Council hereby makes the following appointments. Central Connecticut Health District Board of Directors, Jerry Lynn Nagel, 1175 Willard Avenue, Party R, term 10/13/2020 to 6/30/2023, replaces expiration of M. Sidlowski.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Nagel. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote, please.
Counselor Anist,
Yes.
Counselor Braverman,
Yes.
Counselor Butreko,
Yes.
Counselor Camillo,
Yes.
Counselor Donahue,
Yes.
Counselor Menke,
Yes.
Counselor Minor,
Yes.
Counselor Nagel,
Yes.
Mayor Del Buono.
Yes,
9-0.
wonderful. We have another appointment, Mr. Counselor
Sure.
Menke?
Resolved, that the Newington Town Council hereby makes the following appointment. Library Board, Elizabeth Livingston, 165 Walsh Avenue, Party R, term
Oh,
10,
hold on
13,
one second,
20.
Counselor Menke, I apologize. There was an error on the memo in our packet. On the screen is the corrected address.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just,
No, that's,
uh,
we're all going by our packets. It's hard in this, in the Zoom meetings.
yeah, okay. So I would amend the address to be, I got my glasses on now. Hang on. 1598 Main Street. Again, Party R, term 10/13/2020 to 11/30/2025, replaces resignation of P. Foley.
Second, please.
Okay.
Seconded by Counselor Braverman. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote, please.
Counselor Anist,
Yes.
Counselor Braverman,
Yes.
Counselor Butreko,
Yes.
Counselor Camillo,
Yes.
Counselor Donahue,
Yes.
Counselor Menke,
Yes.
Counselor Minor,
Yes.
Counselor Nagel,
Yes.
Mayor Del Buono.
Yes,
9-0.
thank you. Next item is tax refunds, approval of October 13th, 2020 refunds for an overpayment of taxes. Deputy Mayor Bedrejko, would you please read that motion?
That property tax refunds in the amount of $13,939.23 are hereby approved in the individual amounts and for those named on the request for refund of an overpayment of taxes certified by the revenue collector, a list of which is attached to this resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Donahue. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to roll call vote.
Counselor Anist,
Yes.
Counselor Braverman,
Yes.
Counselor Butreko,
Yes.
Counselor Camillo,
Yes.
Counselor Donahue,
Yes.
Counselor Menke,
Yes.
Counselor Minor, Counselor Nagel,
Yes.
Mayor Del Buono.
Yes,
8-0.
Yes, back again.
Okay.
Counselor Minor just weighed in yes, so that's a 9-0 vote. Thank you. All right, next item is minutes of previous meetings. I would entertain a motion to accept the town council minutes from the meetings of September 22nd, 2020 special meeting and September 22nd, 2020 regular meeting.
So moved.
So moved by Counselor Menke, and a second?
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Donahue. Any discussion on those? Seeing none, we will go to roll call vote, please.
Counselor Anist, Counselor Braverman,
Yes.
Counselor Butreko,
Yes.
Counselor Camillo,
Yes.
Counselor Donahue,
Yes.
Counselor Menke,
Yes.
Counselor Minor,
Yes.
Counselor Nagel,
Yes.
Mayor Del Buono.
Yes,
9-0.
thank you. Next item is written and oral communications from the town manager. Mr. Chapman, do you have anything for us?
Yes, I do. A couple of promotions and hiring. We're happy to report the appointment of Renata Bertoti as the new town planner. She'll be starting November 1st. She is currently serving as the Director of Planning, Development, and Enforcement for the city of Meriden and has been there since 2018. She had worked for the town of Manchester prior to that for 11 years. as a senior planner and Windsor as the assistant town planner. She has a bachelor's degree in geography and a master's degree in geography as well. She resides right here in Newington, which is really a plus. And she'll be starting actually November 2nd. Along with this, I think I advised you that Andrew Armstrong, our current assistant town planners, today was his last day. He's going to the town of Bristol for a higher level job. And what we're doing is we're moving one of our current employees from his current position over in the engineering, Eric Hinckley. He will be moved over underneath the town planner, and he will take his duties serving the Conservation Commission with him. So Eric will become the overall land use enforcement officer for the town, something that I think will help the town out greatly. So he'll have conservation, light, zoning, and wetland responsibilities. So he's starting tomorrow since Andrew left today. So those are two good changes. We're happy to see Andrew moving on to bigger and better things. And Craig Minor will be retiring as of the end of this month. So things are changing in Newington.
Great, thank you for the update. I wish all the best to Mr. Minor and Andrew as well in their future endeavors, whatever those may be. And welcome to Renata, our new town planner. And I wish Eric all the best in his new position as well. Did I miss anybody?
That was great.
All right. Any other council comments or questions for Mr. Chapman? Okay, we'll move on. The next item is council liaison committee reports. Deputy Mayor Bedrejko.
Yeah, I just want to mention again that the public hearing, the TPZ public hearing tomorrow for changing 9 parcels of land on Willard Avenue between the Connecticut Fast Track Station and Spring Street. That's the Newington Junction Station. And the 2 parcels on the west side, that's where the gas station and Dunkin' Donuts is. The petition or the application is to change that from a mix of, there's currently residential and business and industrial there, and the requested zoning changes to a planned development. And this application to change it to planned development will allow in the future, if the property owners want to, it will facilitate transit-oriented development. That's on the east side. But on the west side, if this change goes through, an immediate plan is to have a drive-through for the Dunkin' Donuts there. So I urge any residents in that area, if they're interested, to call into the public hearing tomorrow, TPZ at 7 o'clock.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilor Minor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just an update from the fire department liaison is they do have a outside firm that has been contracted to conduct interviewing for the position of chief. The position has closed. All of the applications have been submitted and we'll be waiting the decision from the board. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilor Minor. Councilor Menke.
Also from the fire department, I would report that last Wednesday I attended the fire prevention demonstrations. It was a drive-through. First time I've ever been to a fire prevention thing where you actually drove right through the firehouse. I thought it was really well attended. I thought the fire department did an excellent job of presenting sort of in a drive-through fashion their literature. But I was also greatly impressed by the number of cadets that were there that were participating, and they really worked hard to. I kind of felt a little silly going through myself because I think they were expecting kids in the car, and I didn't have any kids in the car. But they really made an effort to show us what the important parts of fire prevention were, and they used a creative approach to get around the COVID issue and still have a fire prevention demonstration. So I appreciate their efforts.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we will move on to public participation in general. Any member of the public may raise their hand. If you're in the Zoom app, you can use the raise hand function in the participants window. And if you are phoning in, you can use the *9 function to raise your hand. Let's see, Miss Lyons. Go right ahead.
Hi, this is Rose Lyons. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to be sure. On the Mill Pond Park allocation of monies, I think I heard the town manager say the money may be coming out of the enterprise account. I'm just urging everyone to have the same idea of what can be taken out of enterprise, what can be taken out of the Parks and Rec CIP, as well as our regular CIP and the public school CIP. When you start looking at how these budgets are set up, having sat through many meetings over the last 12 years, there's been 3 town managers, 2 facilities directors, 2 finance directors, and each town manager has had a different view as to how the CIP should work. And quite honestly, some of the committees were like the gang that couldn't shoot straight because they didn't know how they were supposed to work. John Salamone would come in with suggestions rated 1 to 20. They would discuss them, re-rank them, bring it to the town council. Tanya would come in with suggestions and basically looked to me like they were rubber stamped and turned over to the town council. And now this town manager, Mr. Chapman, wants to revamp it. While I agree that revamping has to be done, and I have advocated for it for years, I don't think we have to go back 20 years ago to when he was town manager and pick up practices back then. I don't think we need to also do the 2006 practices, but there must have been some reason to change from Mr. Chapman's style to Mr. Bowen and that council's style, and maybe we can get the best of all of it, and CCM and any other towns and how they work their CIP plans. As for 690 Cedar Street, while I agree that you followed the letter of the law with your public hearing under section 7-163E and you held your public hearing, I find a big lack of transparency in providing any information to the public as to what we were supposed to discuss or make comments on. I would like to know if we at least got the money back that we spent between our CIP monies and grant monies and things like that. Don't get me wrong. I've been watching 690 Cedar Street through many, many economic development meetings, through many town council meetings, and so forth and so on. And speaking of town council meetings, I don't recall anything being discussed other than you were going into public or into executive session and the public wasn't privy to that information. I'm glad to hear that you're going to have a special meeting so that the council itself can get up to speed on it on Thursday night. I guess the only other thing with the connectivity plan, I did ask a question of our town engineer as to who's going to be responsible for the maintenance of the sidewalks, the plowing and so forth, and he said the town would be responsible for the area in the town transfer station, and the owner of the property, 3 parcels of property up to Lewis Street, would be responsible for that as well. So there's going to be some, responsibility on the town for what's going to be done. But again, it's a good project. I think it needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lyons. Any other member of the public that would wish to be recognized? I don't see any other hands up in our participant window, so we will move on to remarks by counselors. All right, seeing none, we will move on to a motion to adjourn. Who can do that for me? Motion made by Counselor Braverman and seconded by Counselor Menke.
Sure.
All right, any discussion? All right, I don't think we need a roll call vote for this one. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We stand adjourned at 9:59. Thank you, everyone. See you on
Good night, everybody.
Thursday.
Good night. Good night.
Aye.
Good night.
Good night.
James?